I would like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone. The committee has under consideration the estimates of the Ministry of Labour and Immigration for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2022. I'd ask that we go around the table and have members introduce themselves for the record. My name is Nathan Neudorf, the MLA for Lethbridge East and the chair of this committee. We will begin starting to my right. Miranda.
Sorry. Miranda Rosen, MLA for Banff Kananaskis.
Evening, everyone. Cyril Turton, MLA for Spruce Grove, Stony Plain.
Good evening. Jackie Armstrong-Homnick, MLA, Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville.
Christina Gray, MLA for Edmonton Millwoods.
Good evening, everyone. Chris Nielsen, MLA for Edmonton Decorah.
Thank you very much. Now we'll go to the members participating virtually. When I call your name, please introduce yourself for the record. Ms. Pitt.
Angela Pitt, MLA, Airdrie East.
Mr. Roswell. Mr. Walker.
Good evening. Jordan Walker, MLA, Sherwood Park.
Mr. Loyola.
Good evening, everybody. Rod Loyola, MLA for Edmonton Ellerslie.
Thank you very much. Due to the current landscape we are in, all ministry staff will be participating in the estimates debate virtually. Minister, please introduce yourself, and I would ask you to also introduce the officials around your table. And when they are called on to speak, if they are called on to speak, would they please introduce themselves at that time for the record?
Thank you, Chair. Jason Copping, Minister of Labour and Immigration, MLA for Calgary Varsity, and with me I have Sean McLeod, Deputy Minister, Sonia Johnston, Assistant Deputy Minister of Financial Services, Michelle Evans, Assistant Deputy Minister, Workforce Strategies, Lenore Neudorf, Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategy and Policy, Miles Morris, Assistant Deputy Minister, Safe, Fair and Healthy Workplaces, and Andre Rivet, Acting Executive Director, Financial Services.
Thank you very much. For the record, Ms. Neudorf is my favorite. I'd like to note the following substitutions for the record. Member Rod Loyola as Deputy Chair for Ms. Goring, Mr. Turton for Mr. Reid, Mr. Tour for Mr. Barnes, and Ms. Pitt for Mr. Van Dyken. Before we begin, I would note that in accordance with the recommendations from the Chief Medical Officer of Health, attendees at today's meeting are advised to leave the appropriate distance between themselves and other meeting participants. In addition, as indicated in the February 25th, 2021 memo from the Honourable Speaker Cooper, I would remind everyone of committee room protocols in line with health guidelines, which require members to wear masks in committee rooms and while seated, except when speaking, at which time they may choose not to wear a face covering. A few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. Please note that the microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee proceedings are being live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio and video stream and transcripts of meetings can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Those participating virtually are asked to turn on their camera while speaking and please mute their microphone when not speaking. To be placed on the speakers list, virtual participants should email or send a message in the group chat to the committee clerk, and members in the room are asked to please wave or otherwise signal to the chair. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of the meeting. Speaking rotation and time limits. Honourable members, a standing order to set out the process for consideration of the main estimates. A total of 3 hours has been scheduled for consideration of the estimates for the Ministry of Labour and Immigration. Standing Order 59.016 establishes the speaking rotation and speaking times. In brief, the Minister or member of Executive Council, acting on the Minister's behalf, will have 10 minutes to address the committee. At the conclusion of his comments, a 60-minute speaking block for the official opposition begins, followed by a 20-minute speaking block for independent members, if any, and then a 20-minute speaking block for the government caucus. Individuals may only speak for up to 10 minutes at a time, but time may be combined between the member and the minister. The rotation of speaking time will then follow the same rotation of the official opposition, independent members, and the government caucus, with individual speaking time set to 5 minutes for both the member and the ministry. These times may be combined, making it a 10-minute block. One final note, please remember that discussion should flow through the chair at all times, regardless of whether or not speaking times are combined. If members have any questions regarding speaking times or the rotation, please feel free to send an email or message to the committee clerk about the process. With the concurrence of the committee, I will call a 5-minute break near the midpoint of the meeting. However, the 3-hour clock will continue to run. Does anyone oppose having a break? Seeing none, we will establish that break time nearer to the time that it happens. Ministry officials at the direction of the minister may address the committee. Ministry officials are asked to please introduce themselves for the record prior to commenting. Space permitting, opposition caucus staff may sit appropriately distanced at the table to assist their members. However, members have priority to sit at the table at all times. If debate is exhausted prior to 3 hours, the ministry's estimates are deemed to have been considered for the time allotted in the schedule, and the committee will adjourn. Points of order will be dealt with as they arise. However, the speaking block time and the overall 3-hour meeting clock will continue to run. Any written material provided in response to questions raised during the main estimates should be tabled by the minister in the Assembly for the benefit of all members. The vote on the estimates and any amendments will occur in Committee of the Supply on March 17, 2021. Amendments must be in writing and approved by Parliamentary Council prior to the meeting at which they are to be moved. The original amendment is to be deposited with the committee clerk, and as a courtesy, an electronic version of the signed original should be provided to the committee clerk for distribution to committee members. I will now invite the Minister of Labour and Immigration to begin with his opening remarks. You have 10 minutes, and I will try to indicate, because of the virtual access, at 1 minute I will raise my hand so that you have some signal of the time. With that, Minister, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here today to discuss Labour and Immigration's 2021-22 budget estimates and 21 to 24 business plan. We've already introduced the staff that are with me today, and I'd like to start my comments by indicating that Budget 2021 is focused on protecting Albertans' lives and livelihoods as we face one of the most difficult times in our history. The last year has been a time of great uncertainty as a pandemic swept our province and threatened our health and our economy. In response to this dual threat, our government has adopted an approach that strikes a balance between the actions necessary to limit the spread of the disease and the need to keep our economy functioning. Budget 2021 continues this approach with a focus on healthcare and on jobs. We are increasing spending in healthcare and allocating funds to fight the pandemic. We are also investing in economic recovery through the Alberta Recovery Plan. To do this, Alberta's government has developed key sector strategies and is diversifying our economy. We will increase spending in our capital plan, which will create jobs, and invest in new and existing training programs for Albertans to develop their skills and get back to work. In addition to protecting lives and livelihoods, Budget 2021 continues Alberta's government focus on spending responsibly. We must be fiscally responsible so we can provide funding to meet the challenges of the pandemic while laying the groundwork for Alberta's economic recovery once the pandemic subsides. For Alberta's government, fiscal accountability means aligning our spending with that of other provinces and keeping our net debt to GDP ratio below 30%. The Labour and Immigration budget is very much in line with our general government approach. First, I would like to talk about how we are supporting lives and livelihoods during this pandemic. In fiscal 2021, the Ministry of Labour and Immigration is forecasting an additional $506 million over and above its budgeted $210 million to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll speak briefly to 3 programs that we delivered over and above our normal programming through these difficult times. The first of these programs is the Emergency Isolation Support Program. As a government, we were quick to provide financial support to Albertans who lost their income as a result of a requirement for mandatory self-isolation due to COVID-19. The temporary one-time funding was provided to Albertans to ensure they can continue to take care of themselves and their families while they had to self-isolate and had no income. The emergency income support bridged the short period until the Government of Canada supports became available on April the 6th. A total of approximately $108 million was provided to over 94,000 Albertans, and $64 million was attributed to the 2021 fiscal year. The second such program is the Workers' Compensation Board Premium Support. It was a temporary program that waived 50% of 2020 Workers' Compensation Board premiums for small and medium-sized private sector employers. This is forecasted to be a $280 million program, which provided financial flexibility and support when businesses needed it the most. Just under $210 million was allocated for this fiscal year. This helped provide immediate relief to more than 180,000 medium-sized private sector businesses And finally, the Critical Worker Benefit Program. Recently, I was happy to join the Premier to announce this program, which recognizes more than 300,000 critical workers for their work during the second wave of the pandemic. Alberta's government is distributing up to $465 million in funds in this fiscal year to provide a one-time payment of $1,200 to eligible workers. This includes up to $118 million funded by the province and up to $347 million in federal funding. These funds will go right into the pockets of eligible, hardworking Albertans and will provide a helpful boost to our frontline workers and our economy as we move forward in 2021. The Critical Worker Benefit is a recognition of everything our critical workers have done and continue to do to support our province during the pandemic. And as the pandemic continues, Alberta's government will continue to be there for Albertans every step of the way. At Labour and Immigration, we are continuing to assess the needs of all of our worker support programs and adjust our funding as needed to protect the lives and livelihoods of Albertans in the present times. There are two other programs that I would like to touch on that protect lives and livelihoods. The first is the Coal Workforce Transition Program. This program supports workers in the coal industry as we transition into lower carbon electricity generation. Specifically, we are increasing the budget for the Coal Workforce Transition Program for 2021-22. This increase will ensure support for workers whose jobs will be affected this year by the transition from coal-fired electrical generation to less carbon-intensive energy sources. Funds from the Coal Workforce Transition Program will help workers as they seek new employment, retrain, relocate for a job, or retire. The increase in funds for 21-22 is coming from funding allocated to the Coal Workforce Transition Program in future years. We are simply reallocating funding to this fiscal year to make sure our coal workers have the support they need when they need it. Alberta's government continues to work with coal-fired electricity generators to ensure workers can access the needed programs and supports as the province transitions to less carbon-intensive energy sources. Making smart investments in training programs that focus on getting Albertans back to work is part of how we are protecting Albertans' livelihoods while being fiscally responsible. And this leads me to the next program I'd like to highlight, the Alberta Jobs Now program. Alberta's government is planning to invest just under $200 million to create the Alberta Jobs Now program to support hiring unemployed Albertans into thousands of jobs. This program will help reduce the cost of hiring and training unemployed Albertans and encourage employers to create jobs for Albertans. This draws upon $185 million of federal funding and remains subject to final federal approval. The Alberta Jobs Now program provides Albertans with opportunities to find new work and get important job training that will prepare them for the future. And we are very excited about this program as a way of getting Albertans back to work and supporting our economy. And this is in addition to our regular programming to help Albertans integrate into the workforce. In protecting lives and livelihoods, our ministry has increased spending in 2021 by over 200% and is increasing spending in 21-22 budget by $122 million, an increase of over 55%. But in addition to supporting lives and livelihoods, we are also ensuring the long-term sustainability of our programs. Labour and Immigration is removing red tape, streamlining services, and making them easier to access and more efficient. The change between our 2021 budget to the 21-22 estimate is a 4% decrease when it comes to our core operations. This has been accomplished through finding efficiencies, and I like to stress we are maintaining services that Alberta relies upon. We have been through a lot together over the last year, and through it all, Albertans have displayed courage and resilience. The community and entrepreneurial spirit of the province has been evident, and we have protected our vulnerable and kept our economy running. We will likely be facing uncertainty for some time, but what remains the same is our government's commitment to supporting Albertans. As we enter the second year of the pandemic in our province, Alberta's government remains focused on protecting Albertans' lives and livelihoods. Labour and Immigration's budget and business plan contributes to this goal by focusing on training programs that prepare Albertans for the jobs of the future and by finding efficiencies without reducing the services that Albertans rely upon. We are committed to using our funds wisely so that we can focus our resources on getting Albertans back to work and protecting their rights and keeping them safe while on the job. And that starts with investing in Albertans so they can get jobs and support economic recovery. Although the last year has been difficult, there are reasons for hope. And with Budget 2021, we are making investments that will help forge towards better times and a brighter economic future. Thank you for your time, Chair, and I will welcome questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Minister. I will just take one quick moment. And Mr. Tour, would you please introduce yourself?
What's going on?
Please introduce yourself for the record.
Hello, everyone. Devinder Toor, MLA, Calgary Falconridge.
Thank you very much. For the hour that follows, members of the official opposition and the minister may speak. The timer will be set for 20-minute intervals so that you are aware of the time. Again, I will hold up my hand with 1 minute left of your speaking time if you happen to hit that maximum. Ms. Gray, are you hoping to share time or do block time?
I would prefer to share time if the minister's amenable.
Minister, are you happy to share time?
I'd be happy to share time.
Thank you very much. With that, we will start. Ms. Gray.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the minister and his officials who are here to answer questions. It is appreciated. As always, estimates goes by very, very quickly. And so I will try to be brief with my questions and thank the minister for being brief with his answers. I will try not to interrupt because of feedback, but if I have heard an answer, I may need to move on to another topic. I apologize, I'm not trying to be rude, just need to get through lots of material here in these estimates. I'd like to start by talking about the COVID-19 pandemic that we've been in for the past year. Looking back at last year's estimates, we were just on the cusp of all of this beginning in the province. And so I want to talk about a few different aspects of that. But firstly, specifically the important role that labor and occupational health and safety plays in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. We talked at last year's estimates about learnings from the previous SARS outbreak, the report from Ontario, and the importance of labor working in lockstep with the pandemic response. And I have to say I was very disappointed because initial COVID-related materials, especially workplace-focused materials, really didn't seem to incorporate the legislation, the responsibilities that employers must do things like assess work sites for hazards when we were dealing with this new COVID-19 hazard. So I'd really just like to start with a broad question to the minister, which is, in the initial days of the response, in the initial months of the response, it did not seem like labor had a strong voice at the table. The materials that were coming out did not reflect the internal responsibility system. They did not reflect employers' responsibilities to keep workers safe. In fact, early materials didn't even refer to workers for weeks, months into the pandemic. I would love to hear you speak a little bit more about labor's role in the response. If you had a strong seat at the table, and when a public inquiry into the government's response is undertaken, whether we will have learned from that SARS report that we spoke of a year ago, or if we will be seeing that we would have had more healthcare workers and other workers kept safe had labor had a stronger role.
Well, thank you for your...
I will just interject just to allow Hansard time to change the microphones to eliminate feedback. So if I do that, it's not to take time, but it just helps them. Minister, you may respond.
Well, thank you for the question. And as you may recall, we had this conversation during the debate throughout the, I think it was over 6 months ago in the spring during government COVID response. You know, occupational health and safety has been very involved, working hand in glove with Alberta Health Services, where we can coordinate. I fully appreciate, you know, the role that workplaces and workers play, because at the end of the day, as you know, our occupational health and safety system is based on workers and employers taking responsibility for health and safety, identifying the risks, and then looking ways to mitigate those risks. And so that was the approach that we took as occupational health and safety. The pandemic, you know, was new to many when it started out. So we relied on advice from Alberta Health Services and our Chief Medical Officer of Health about how to address that. That advice was put out through our website. Then we also worked with numerous industries, as you may recall, to put out best practices in the workplaces and shared them not only through a portal, our portals that we had set up through our jobs, now the jobs, the economy, and ministry, but also through occupational health and safety. We had a portal set up sharing best practices, deal with this. And then we also, throughout the pandemic, shared information across ministries across the province and federally about what our learnings were, and that came back to, and we were able to publish that within our work sites. So we occupational health and safety has played a role in terms of working with businesses and working with workers to ensure that we got the information out to the work sites so that we could protect workers. We put this out also on the website. And also we changed how we did inspections. As we recalled before, especially initially, we trained up inspectors to go out to work sites, particularly in the healthcare industries, to do specific inspections. And then throughout the pandemic, we also focused on those areas which were the highest risk for COVID-19. For example, after the first wave, when we began reopening, we targeted those businesses and workplaces that were opening up in each stage to make sure that they understood what were the safe ways to operate. And that included and then same way we did with schools, where we highlighted schools when they started opening in September with the pandemic. And then we continue to target those areas throughout the pandemic, doing inspections and re-inspections and ensuring that we were working with our sister agencies, including AHS and other agencies, municipal affairs, and providing advice to both workers and to employers so that they had the information they need so they can operate effectively. And I would like to say, when you take a look at how well Alberta workplaces have.
Thank you, Minister. Ms. Gray wanted to re-engage.
Yes, thank you, Minister. And I was very interested in what you were sharing, but because of shortness of time, I just want to interrupt. I appreciate the recognition that this is such a serious workplace issue. I mean, currently WCB has accepted almost 7,000 workplace claims. Like the number of workers exposed in the workplace and who then got ill that number to me strikes me as high. I don't know how it compares cross-jurisdictionally. I just know that's 7,000 Albertans and Alberta workers that we know of so far, and it continues. Speaking specifically about one of the most serious outbreaks that we saw at our meatpacking plants, we saw an outbreak take place at Cargill, where nearly half the workforce, a total of over 1,500 cases were linked to the plant. 2 workers died. The father of a plant worker passed away from COVID-19, and it did become the largest outbreak in North America. Looking at the situation that took place at Cargill, especially in the early days, there was communication from the workers that they did not feel safe. There was communication from the union, UFCW, that they were concerned. In fact, requests to close the plant were made. During similar timeframes, telephone town halls were being hosted to tell the workers it was safe. My question to you, Minister, is from your office, you had the ability to intervene, to perhaps facilitate conversations that needed to happen between the union and the employer, perhaps send someone in to mediate. Did you consider taking earlier action to support Cargill and the workers at Cargill to make sure their workplace was safe? And do you have any regrets for how that Cargill situation was handled?
Sorry. Thank you, Ms. Gray. I appreciate the levity of your topic. Please tie that into the business plan and estimates. I understand the correlation, but if you wouldn't mind, Minister, up to you to respond.
Well, thank you for the question. I want to go back just one last comment to the previous question, because I was going to close, but when we talked about workers and work sites, and we take a look at a high level, and I recognize there's WCB claims out there. when we took a look at number of outbreaks that we've had at work sites in the province versus the number of work sites, the number is far less than 2% of work sites, which show a testament to, broadly speaking, and in general sense, and there are a few exceptions, but show a testament of how well workers and employers work together to be able to identify the risks and address those risks with the support of occupational health and safety and AHS. That it was largely successful, and the vast majority of those outbreaks were addressed quickly and did not expand beyond very small numbers. Now, I do appreciate your comments in regards to Cargill. I can tell you that occupational health and safety was involved through that. They inspected prior to that outbreak. They inspected numerous times and inspected after that. That was early on in the pandemic. And occupational health and safety, when we were taking a look at what was going on within the plant, the measures, as I understand it, were in place, and what had occurred there was concerns that were also going on, not necessarily within the plant, but also impacts, and this was also commented by the Chief Medical Officer of Health shortly after, that was happening on outside the plant. And so we learned from that in terms of measures not only to be within the plant, within the work site, but stuff that actually happens around the work site and within the community, and measures were put in place to address that.
Thank you. Ms. Gray?
Thank you very much, Minister. Even to this day, I would suggest that I continue to hear from workers that they feel their voices are not being heard in ongoing outbreaks, as the recent situation in Olymel. But I will leave it at that comment and ask a question that's a little bit more related to the data. With COVID-19 and what we're seeing with the accepted claims at WCB, does your department have an estimate or what this impact will be on our lost time claim rates? How this will impact some of those important measures that we track to measure what's happening in our workplaces and with injury statistics, just as an example, certainly because there's been so much workplace transmission.
Minister, do you respond?
So I'm just looking at our lost time claim rates. Generally speaking, initially, the lost time claim rates were down simply because there was a decrease in other workplace injuries throughout the pandemic. Yeah, we don't have the lost time claim rate for 1920, which is not going to cover the entire period we're looking at, is 1.5. And we don't have the final lost time claim rates for this year. But what I can commit to you is to get back to you on that. When we looked at this issue several months ago, this was just in the fall, what we were seeing was that even though there was more lost time claim rates associated with COVID, there was less associated with other injuries. So the overall rate didn't go up. And same from a cost standpoint, the costs were actually down at that point in time. But I can get back to you in terms of details on that.
Fair enough. I appreciate that. Thank you, Minister. From the fiscal plan, page 176, it's Schedule 6 operating expense. I'd like to just spend a moment breaking down the line that is attributed to labor and immigration for COVID-19 and recovery plans, because as I was just doing a deep dive on the budget, I wanted to make sure I understood where each of these numbers was coming from. So starting with 114 in 2019-20, I imagine that's almost entirely emergency isolation support, but I believe 114 is slightly higher than emergency isolation support, so a little bit of something else. And then if you could also just break down that 511 in the budget 2020-2021 forecast for me.
To the Minister to respond.
Just a brief moment. So the first number, the 114, is a combination of the isolation support, and there's also some associated with the workers' compensation claims, the deferral program. Then when you get to the 511, includes, again, emergency isolation support, workers' compensation board premium support, the critical worker benefit, and then the Alberta Jobs Now.
Thank you. Ms. Gray?
Thank you. And so then the 2021-22 would be primarily that Alberta Jobs Now line item, I would think. So great segue. Let's talk about Alberta Jobs Now. My question to you to start is I was very confused going through the fiscal plan because it's quite clear the federal government announced $185 million for this program on December 16th. But throughout the fiscal plan, in the highlights sheet, it says $136 million over 3 years for the Alberta Jobs Now program. So why is the government talking about $136 million when the federal government has given us $185? And secondly, why are we advertising it over 3 years when the program was supposed to be 80% spent this year with maybe a little next year? I'm just super confused why the government is putting out lower numbers.
The minister to respond.
Sorry, Chair, I'll get used to not responding directly. Member Gray and I are used to going across the aisle in QP. It's awfully way quicker. So that's a great question. So the 136 million that Treasury Board and Finance refers to, because they're talking about budget next year's budget and the 3 years that year and 2 years after that. So they talk about 136 million. In my opening remarks, I made a comment that we are the Alberta Jobs Now program really is just under $200 million, $198 million to be precise. We're using $185 million of the federal from federal programming, and then we are topping that up with provincial dollars for the administration of the program, and that the intention is to start that this fiscal year, and then it's 136 million of total spending next fiscal year and the two after that.
Thank you. So I'm confused, Minister, because when I look at your expense by vote, it shows clearly 62 million in this current fiscal year, of which we have 20 days left, and then it shows 127.5 in 2021-22, which would lead me to believe that the provincial government is actually adding 4.5 million to this program. You're indicating that there is more on top of that. Which line item would we find that additional money?
The minister?
The multi-year plan. And it's unfortunately it's buried in workforce strategies line item, but there is money associated with this in 22-23 and 23-24.
Okay, so but it's just there's no way to see that through the budget at the moment, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, in the government press release for this program for 185, it's really clear that the federal government intended for these funds to build on the strong delivery networks already in place in Alberta, with the priority to get every dollar out the door quickly. But yet, program hasn't been announced at this point. Will you be using the delivery networks that you currently have, the strong roster of training programs that you have in your arsenal, Training for Work, which we've discussed in the past, or are you spinning up an entirely new program rather than using the existing LMDA programs that you have at your disposal?
So we're creating a new program, the AGNP, for this, and we didn't use our existing. As you may recall, the announcement came out in December. The ability to actually leverage all those dollars quickly was challenging, particularly given that we were in the middle of the second wave, and we wanted to line up our program as we came out of the second wave, and then we start seeing an uptake in employment, so we can actually use these dollars more efficiently, and in essence get more bang for the buck from this program.
And how many FTEs will be involved in administering the Alberta Jobs Now program?
It'll be approximately 5 employees.
Minister, did you say 5?
65.
Thank you very much. That makes a little bit more sense, and I appreciate the clarification. The 65 employees, how many will be new versus reallocated from other programs? Because while I note in the fiscal plan tables, it shows that Labour will have a net increase of 10 employees. There's obviously a lot of movement happening within the department. And so of those 65, what programs will they be coming from to this new role of administering the Alberta Jobs Now program?
So they're predominantly all new employees associated with that.
Thank you, Minister. Which of your employees are losing their jobs to make room for these 65 new?
It's the end of the first 20 minutes. On to the second 20 minutes to the minister.
So the question which employees are losing their jobs, we have been doing as part of identifying operational efficiencies and also because of a hiring freeze, positions have not been filled, and most of it's through attrition. So saying that people are losing their jobs to replace them is actually incorrect. They're not losing their jobs.
Thank you. Okay, so you are making the commitment that none of the employees inside of the Labour and Immigration Ministry will be losing their jobs over the next fiscal year.
So we did, when you take a look at the high level, most of the jobs are for efficiency. We have, as we talked about before, for example, when we made changes to the FPO and the MPO, there were job losses there. Saying that there was nobody had lost their jobs, that's not actually people losing their jobs for people to come into this program. That's not the case. But we actually, most of our jobs that the open positions that we have are through attrition, with the exception of the MPO and FPO, where we made changes to those programs, and 20 jobs were eliminated.
Okay, thank you. Along the same lines of the Alberta Jobs Now, making the most of our labour market development agreement money, I noted that in your expense by vote, the spending on skills and training support, you were $4 million under your budget this year during a time of record unemployment and quite a bit of need for workers to get support to reattach to the labour market. Why did you underspend the skills and training support at the same time as you are touting new spending on jobs and training? Why wouldn't you have spent your full budget in this very critical year?
So we actually spent that $4 million on training and retraining, but we didn't do it through our department. So $3 million went to the ag worker training program delivered by Agriculture and Forestry, and $1 million funding went to the driver training program delivered by Transportation. So all those fundings were actually used for training. That $4 million, it was just delivered by the departments, and they identified a need for it. And as you know how the training program works, we do this on RFPs and we release this throughout the year. They had a need to do that and identified a way to deliver that, and we provided them with the funding.
Thank you, Minister. I'm thrilled to hear that the money got spent on jobs training, because I think that's incredibly important right now, and it's certainly an area that the government needs to be focused on. Speaking of that type of training, when thinking about the new Alberta Jobs Now program, I wanted to talk to you about how similar or dissimilar it might be from the Canada-Alberta Job Grant, which provides employers directly money to train employees. And specifically, I have in my hand right now the Workforce Development Agreement 2019-2020 annual report. But the one stat I couldn't find in this report was the breakdown of how much of CAJG was used for employers hiring new employees, so that 100% of training costs covered when you hire new, which you and I have discussed before and has disappointingly underperformed. I was hoping perhaps there might have been an uptake of the use of the program for new employees.
The Minister.
I apologize, I don't have that stat for you right now, and we can get that to you. I do know that we have been pushing this within department out to employers, saying that you can get 100%, especially now, given the impact that we had in terms of the incredibly high unemployment associated with the downturn in the economy and COVID-19. But I don't have that stat for you right now.
That's great.
Would you be able to speak to, has there been significantly more uptake? Because my experience with CAJG was, both through my time in that seat and through estimates with you the last 2 years, was that the uptake is quite low. And so my question to follow up is just, will the Alberta jobs now be modeled after a similar CAJG model, where it's, if you hire someone, we will provide 100% of the training funds? And do you think, I'll just leave the question at that to start.
It's more similar to the Canada-Alberta Job Grant than other programs, but it's not going to be exactly the same, and we'll be announcing it in the hopefully very near future.
Okay, that's great.
Well, perfect, and I don't mean to supersede your announcement. We're very eager to have this program roll out. If it's modeled more closely after CAJG, then I will just tell you now that I have concerns that, I mean, if the money is intended to create new jobs, we've already seen programs where someone getting 100% of training fees when they create a new job, it goes vastly underutilized. I would not want to see the $185 million from the federal government mostly get used to upskill and retrain existing employees rather than creating those new jobs. And so I will leave that as a thought to you, and I'll ask you a question and you can respond to both. The question is, in your current budget, you have $62 million to get out the door before March 31 in roughly 20 days. I asked the finance minister and he said that you would be announcing things soon. I will just ask, will you be able to get that $62 million out the door into employers' hands and creating jobs?
To the Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So on the first issue, the program will be different enough so that you don't need to be concerned about that particular concern. I just wanted to share that with you. In regards to, you know, our what we put in the budget is for this year is $62 million. We're looking to implement it in the very near future and move forward with the program.
That's great.
Okay, thank you. Very excited to see this program roll out and the money benefit Albertans. The delay reminds me of the critical worker benefits, which I would like to talk a little bit about. That is a program that was announced by the federal government. Money from the federal government required some matching dollars from the province, but the implementation was delayed by 9 months. And that delay of getting that money out the door had costs in our economy and for jobs in our province. Now, I will tell you that my office, my colleagues are inundated by concerns from workers who do not qualify for the critical worker benefit. And I've seen even your colleagues ask you about some of the workers who do not qualify. So understanding that there is a fixed pool of money, but also understanding from my many contacts with workers and in the labor movement that they were not consulted on the program design. My question to you would be, how many inquiry calls is the department fielding? How many emails to that CWB email address? How many calls to the phone number? And how have you staffed up to handle that volume?
To the Minister.
So we have staffed up to handle the volume. In terms of the exact volume, I'll have to get back to you on, just a second. Okay. Actually, we have someone here who can speak to you on that issue in terms of the volume.
Hi, Michelle Evans, ADM for Workforce Strategy. I would just like to let the minister know, advise minister, we had 6,930 calls to date on our call center for the critical worker benefit program.
Yeah, that's a lot of calls. May I ask how many FTEs are involved with administering the critical worker benefits? As well, if you can tell me how long does it take to review and process each application? And are you seeing very many applications from people who in the end do not qualify and are having to be denied?
To the minister.
So we have 8 employees working on the critical worker benefit program at this point in time. And we have, and we also have an additional number of employees on contract associated with that. And what number would that be? Okay, we'll just need 1 minute for that. Okay, so and just so you know that the 6 number is an annual number, so it's actually because this is a short-term program, that's over an annual basis. So it's actually far more number. Yeah, sorry, my apologies. It's 8 actual employees, 6 on an FTE basis, and we have some contractors as well that are assisting with the program. In regards to the number of applications that we've had, and maybe if I could ask just to report then on the number of applications that we've had on the program, please.
Again, Minister Michelle Evans, ADM for Workforce Strategies. We've had, at this point in time, 9,284 applications from employers for the program. I unfortunately don't have the stats with me right now on approvals and denials. We're still in the process of actively processing those applications.
And if I may add, so as you recall, the applications are only for private sector employers. As you know, that this program provides a benefit to not-for-profits and public and quasi-public organizations, including Alberta Health Services. The funds for those employees are funded directly to the organization. They do not have to apply. And it's being funded through the line departments that have a relationship with these organizations. So this is just a small portion of the overall program.
That's great.
Thank you. I would be interested to know how many contract employees are involved in this, if you are able to find that number for me. I will also, just for the purposes of the record, certainly I've heard from taxi drivers, Uber drivers, those who were working in so many different essential services. But I've also heard very strongly from employers, quite a few strongly worded letters that I've been copied on that you have received as well, Minister, concerned about how difficult the application process is, as well as the timing, because for many companies it's their year end as well, and essentially putting that administrative burden onto employers. Have you heard that feedback? And is there anything that you can potentially do at this point to make a change to the program to relieve that stress on employers, or to adjust the program to include more of those frontline workers?
To the minister.
So in regards to employers, we received some feedback early on in regards to our process, especially when you had employers who are putting in a large number of employees. We modified our program so they can do an upload of all the data to be able to do that. So we have addressed that issue, and that fix is in place and has been in place for a number of weeks now. We got it in place basically within the first week of the program. In regards to employees, I thank all workers who continue to work throughout the pandemic. They've come to work. They've done an incredible job. And this is why we called it a critical worker benefit. because if it was for essential workers, all workers, more than 80% of the workforce were designated as essential workers. I know you appreciate that there's limited funding. And so as a result of that, we chose to recognize and create a category called critical workers, those who provided supports in healthcare, providing services to the most vulnerable, particularly individuals with disabilities, nurses, and then some private sector who are supporting our food distribution and medicine supply chains, grocery store clerks and those working at low-income workers working at pharmacies. We thank all the workers who continue to do the work. And we made these choices like all provinces made choices across the country in terms of who would receive the benefit. And we made similar choices in this regard.
That's great.
Thank you, Minister. Why did it take 9 months for this program to be designed, developed, and rolled out? Honestly, it looked like Alberta was planning to not use the money until public pressure mounted, and you then chose to. And secondly, on line 8 of the expense by vote, it shows you expect to get nearly 99% of the money out the door before the end of the fiscal, which is in 3 weeks. Are you on track for that?
To the Minister.
So I want to come back to one of your questions earlier because I do have the numbers there. We have for CWB, and I think we had I'm going to confirm that number because it's way off from what I got beforehand. So we'll just ask to confirm that because it's way more than 8, which actually kind of makes more sense. But now, we'll actually confirm that number, and I'll get back to that. In regards to the so my apologies, I got sidetracked with that. Can you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. Why did it take 9 months for this program to be developed and rolled out when it was intended to support workers? I mean, it was originally announced during the first wave by the federal government. Most provinces were able to get that money out the door by the summertime. Our program was vastly different. So just how long it took. And then secondly, line 8 of expense by vote shows you expect to get nearly 99% of the money out the door before the end of fiscal in 3 weeks. And I just wanted to ask if you were on track for that.
Minister, are you making the announcement tomorrow?
So in terms of the 175 million, we are on track to be spent by year end in that regards. In terms of the the length of time, we wanted to design a program that worked for Alberta. This program is complicated. I appreciate that. We are delivering it through multiple departments, and then we had set up also our own delivery system for private sector. But we did deliver it. We're getting the money out the door, and we will get the money out the door by the end of the year. There is some small amount for 21-22, but the 175 million, the vast majority of it, will be spent by the end of this fiscal year, and we are on track for doing that right now.
And did you get confirmation on that contractor's number? I think that was the piece.
We will get back to you on that, and it will be tonight. We just want to confirm the number because it looks a little off.
Then I'd like to talk just a little bit about your business plan. Very disappointed to see how much the business plan had been cut down. That being said, I understand that that's happened to ministries across the board under direction by Treasury Board and Finance. But that lowering of transparency, as well as the removing of performance measures, which we know the Auditor General uses to evaluate performance, is counter to this government's words about transparency, accountability, and whatnot. Within the Labour business plan, there's been significant changes and sections that have been removed, including what used to be outcome 3, ability to attract, retain, unleash the entrepreneurial drive of newcomers, as well as the performance indicators around AINP. I noticed that. I did want to ask, because in comparing last year's business plan to this, for what is now outcome 2, previously outcome 4, which is the performance indicator on occupational health and safety. The lost time claim rate, it appears that the 2018 lost time claim rate has changed from what was printed in the previous report. Did the dates change, perhaps, or how that measure is counted? Would that explain the difference?
The Minister.
Couple of things. So I appreciate that the plan has changed, and we have combined a number of objectives into one. In terms of, you commented on the attraction and retention, particularly in regards to newcomers. That's still very much part of our plan and is part of our recovery strategy. One of the purposes of trying to have a more succinct business plan is so that we could focus on key elements, which is lives and livelihoods, getting Albertans back to work, as well as and doing that through a focus on jobs and a focus on reduction in red tape. So we have that in there. A key element of our plan, which is outlined in this plan, is newcomers. Not only attracting more newcomers, not only to create jobs for themselves, but to create jobs for other Albertans. And we have identical streams, and that's identified in our plan, and it still remains a critical component of what we're doing. In regards to your specific question, my understanding is that it is not uncommon where WCB will restate past numbers when they actually look at this, because they'll look at the numbers that they did before, and they'll come back in and restate that. So my understanding is that that's what happened here.
So you're in your final 20 minutes.
Final 20-minute block. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. And appreciating, I was able to join the Treasury Board and Finance estimates for a while. I heard the language around how this can make us more focused, but if you don't track it, if you don't measure it, if you don't try to improve it, things fall off the side, would be my perspective on that. One of the pieces that is no longer a performance measure was the Alberta Labour Relations Board and their hearing times, which in 2018-19, days from acceptance of application to hearing was at 58. You had set a target for yourself of 69 days for the Labour Relations Board. And did you meet last year's goal of taking longer?
The Minister.
So that wasn't part of this year's plan, so we didn't actually have that data with me. But we continue, and I appreciate, when with changes to the plan, we've changed some of the metrics, and we have fewer metrics in that, and we picked, like, for example, for ALRB, we picked the target in terms of 85% in terms of completing the hearings within 90 days. We couldn't put all the metrics in, but I can tell you that we continue to monitor the metrics, and I don't have that particular metric with me, but we can get back to you on that.
Thank you. That appears to prove the point that if you remove things from the business plan, they fall off in importance. That being said, we were talking about the importance of newcomers and the immigration system. Immigration is a big part of your portfolio, so I'd like to just jump into that for our final block of time, because I have a lot of questions for you. There's a lot happening right now in the immigration space. Specifically, I'd like to talk about that the federal government is essentially increasing immigration at the moment. They have reduced their minimum CRS scores, those comprehensive ranking systems, bringing in more people, both for the economic boost and many other good reasons. You spoke highly about the importance of immigration, as well as making sure there's strong settlement and integration funding. But I note that as part of the response to COVID-19, the AINP allotments have been slashed. And so although Alberta has done that, the federal government choosing to increase immigration, as well as lower some of the barriers to permanent residency, is going to continue to happen. I was hoping you could speak to cutting the numbers of AINP and what impacts that is having, because when I look at the website, I see that you're still needing to process applications from August, which to my mind reminds me of a time when we had all sorts of issues of people expiring in queue and whatnot. How are you making sure that AINP is an effective system for Alberta? And right now, do you believe that it's the best thing to do is to reduce our immigration levels?
The Minister.
On the, I'm going to ask officials to respond to in terms of the current backlog, the current number of applications. But before we get there, I do want to speak to our government's decision last year to limit the number of certificates under the AINP. So as you know, typically we have three main streams of this is outside the two new streams we just announced, but previously we had three main streams that newcomers would come into Alberta under AINP. One of those streams was associated with the Alberta Express Entry. And as part of Alberta Express Entry, that's when the Alberta government would identify certain professions to say we're going to welcome them through the federal Express Entry program and welcome them into Alberta. We chose not to do that last year. And that was roughly 2,000 positions. But the reason for that is there is a tremendous amount of research demonstrating that when newcomers, who are often the most vulnerable in our society, arrive during an economic downturn, they have harder time to find jobs, and that can impact them for their entire careers. So we took a pause to not exercise our ability to bring in, use those certificates last year. And really what that is about, so we can focus on newcomers who are already here, some struggling to find work, matching the influx of newcomers into Alberta with the realities of our labor market. And so we made that choice not only for we made that choice for newcomers because it's incredibly difficult to find jobs, but we anticipate to be able to increasing those numbers in the future. Now, in regards to the current number of applications we have, ask Michelle to respond.
Thank you, Minister. Michelle Evans, ADM Workforce Strategies. So I have statistics as of February 25th, 2021. The AINP has nominated 628 individuals. Our processing times, the data that I have is as of January 22nd, 2021. We have received in 2020 5,675 applications. 1,291 of those are online, 4,384 of those are on paper. In 2021, we have received 601 applications, 598 of those, again, online, 3 on paper. And then just to speak to processing times as well, Alberta Opportunity Stream, we are processing at this point in time about 7 months. That is slightly outside of our 3 to 6 month service standard. We're working on that diligently. The Alberta Express Entry Stream, we are processing with a 1 month period that is within our 1 to 3 month service standard expectation. And again, the Self-Employed Farmer Stream, 6 month is our standard processing time we see there, and that's within our service standard as well.
Thank you very much for those statistics. It's appreciated. One of the impacts that we've seen during the pandemic is an increased need to support Alberta's temporary foreign workers. Pairing that with the government adjusting their immigration strategy in face of all the constraints we're under, we anticipate the federal government will be granting more residency to temporary workers to reach their immigration goals. But for that strategy to be successful, these workers are going to need support. Delivery and early delivery of those supports is going to be really key to their success. And so my question is, what funding in Budget 2021 will be made available to adjust to this change in federal immigration policy? Because I note that line item, there is a small decrease in settlement and integration line. Will the department have the resources to respond flexibly?
The Minister.
So as you indicated, settlement integration line item 2.1, we provide supports for TFWs. We have the TFW advisory office as part of that line item. Plus, we actually do an intake of again, requests for proposals, an intake of programs to provide supports in this line. So there's enough flexibility to be able to respond to the needs of newcomers. And as you say, we have maintained funding in that line element.
Ms. Gray.
Thank you. I am concerned just if federal immigration policy is changing and the line items being maintained, that there could be gaps. And we know provincial funding has often been prioritized to fill the gaps left by federal programs and funding. There is a significant gap right now in Alberta when it comes to high-level language training. So the type that helps not with initial settlement, but with newcomer integration. And my question is if there's any funding in Budget 2021 that will help with this particular gap, are you or your ministry working to solve this gap?
To the Minister.
So our funding primarily focuses on Alberta settlement and integration, English as a second language, the drop-in centers, ESL assessment centers, and then the temporary foreign work support services generally on this. So some of the ESL assessments or the English as a second language drop-in centers may be able to assist in that regard. And the ESL assessment centers all obviously will do the initial assessment. And that's where we do our funding. Historically have done the funding and will continue to do so.
Ms. Gray.
Thank you. So Minister, then I'll just use this opportunity to really just pass on what I'm hearing from our settlement services community, which is that there's a dire need for more high-level language training to help with that newcomer integration. So not just the basic ESL and lowest level, but getting in and helping people even with more skills for the better integration. We have just passed March 2nd, the 1-year anniversary of your Fairness for Newcomers office. I am hearing from constituents and from colleagues that there's a level of frustration with the Fairness for Newcomers office because it really just walks people through an existing process and then sends them off to their professional regulatory organization. Can you explain how the Fairness for Newcomers plan has made any improvements to the credential recognition or any of those pieces that it should be helping people with? Because what I'm hearing from people who've tried to go to it for help is that they are just redirected back to others and that there is no real assistance. I'd be pleased to hear an update from you.
The Minister.
So thank you. So there's two things you're talking about there, and I want to break them apart. So the first, in regards to Fairness to Newcomers office, we just set up the office, as you say, a year ago. The first year has been actually setting baselines. So working with all the professional regulatory bodies, setting out the baselines, looking at what they have. As you recall, the act that we passed made a requirement that the processes be put in place, that the organizations be able to give an answer within 6 months, that they be able to be consistent, that there would also be a process in regards to if there is a dispute, that they have an appeal process, and all these mechanisms have been in place. So the first year has been working with a number of these organizations, like all the professional organizations, to collect the baseline data, the number of newcomers that are coming to them. Do they have their processes in place? The next step, and actually, it's often when you're doing change like this, the work starts. There's a ton of work right up front. It starts slow. You're getting all the baselines. You're making all the connections, understanding where everyone is. And now the next step is which the plan is to get into this year is to start working with organizations to say, okay, how do we speed up your timelines? Not only are you compliant, but how do we make it better? And how do you reduce the barriers while maintaining safety on the same time? So that work is starting now. But I appreciate that some newcomers are saying that we wanted to see this already, but it is coming, and that work is accelerating. And regarding to the Fairness for Newcomers plan, it was not only just the Fair Practices Office, but it was also looking at other things in terms of, how do we provide micro-lending to newcomers who come in who need to take courses to get their accreditation. So we have moved forward in this regard, providing more availability for people to be able to get loans. And approximately, we launched in November 2020 a 3-year microland pilot with Brendan Center for Career Advancement and Service Credit Union. And this will ensure newcomers can access funds they need to upgrade their skills. And in addition, we're extending our current agreement that we talked about before with Windmill Microlending. We're extending it a 3rd year to provide 270 more loans. So we are moving ahead on our various elements of our Fairness for Newcomers plans. Another element I'd just like to point out that we've done some work on is how do you, because the nirvana is before someone comes to Canada to apply, they actually know what they're getting into. They know who to reach out to. They can actually ideally start the accreditation process ahead of time. Now, part of that, and we've made a first steps in that regard, and it was part of our Fairness for Newcomer plan, was actually provide that information to newcomers. So we've done that on the AINP stream. We can put that on the website, and we're also currently working with the federal government as well to be able to get that information out there. So those are just 3 examples of some of the things we're doing. I do appreciate, because I heard the same thing saying, I called the FPO, and we're not seeing change fast enough. I feel that and I hear that, but it's coming. It takes time to set the baseline, but now we're going to start making headway this year.
Ms. Gray.
Thank you, Minister. I wanted to jump back just a little bit. We were talking about the AINP program. I found some news articles when around the International Graduate Entrepreneur Immigration Stream and the Foreign Graduate Startup Visa Stream launch. Did you put out press releases when these were launched? I kind of found out that they had opened after the fact. Was it quietly launched that these new immigration streams were a part? And is this what you would call the Alberta Advantage immigration strategy, or is there a larger strategy that is still to be launched?
The Minister.
So those 2 were soft launched. There was there was an announcement in regards to the first. The second was soft last November. The second was soft launched in January. If I got my dates right. We still have the Alberta Advantage Immigration Strategy, which we did consultation on. We haven't launched that in its entirety yet. Part of it was because of COVID. We've delayed that. We still intend to actually launch it more fulsome. We still have 2 other streams we wanted to do, but the reality is we wanted to get the these 2 entrepreneur, both the graduate program within Alberta and the foreign graduate program up and running, so that people can actually understand it and start using it. There will be a bigger launch coming. And we'll do that as part of the overall Alberta Advantage immigration strategy. But given COVID at this point in time, it's just challenging to do that.
Understood, Minister. And a year ago at the last estimates, you said, I'm looking forward to launching in the near future our Alberta Advantage immigration strategy. I feel that you probably are still looking forward to that. So I will watch for that announcement soon. I'm going to change to a completely different topic, because I want to make sure that I ask. Stakeholders are asking me if I have any information on a regular basis around the regulations for Bill 32. The regulations that follow the legislation that was passed, I guess we're coming up on a year ago, on the Restoring Balance in Alberta's Workplaces Act. Would you be able to provide an update on where that process is? I've also been hearing that the delays in these regulations are related to employer pushback because of the high burden of administration that could be involved.
The Minister.
So I think you're referring to the Labor Relations Code changes. So the changes in regards to construction labor relations were made, and I'm going to get my several weeks ago. They came into effect. Changes in regards to a number of the other items related to union transparency and union dues. We are still, we're going to be in our second round of consultation, and that should come out within weeks. That will be second round of consultation, and then with the intent of regulation this spring, those to be in effect. There's also a couple of other changes associated with that we were delaying simply because the board wanted time to be able to understand the processes they put in place. So, for example, in regards to picket line changes, that change will also, once we get that the board has finalized that'll become in effect this spring as well.
Ms. Gray.
It has had quite a bit of change in the last few years, so I can understand them needing time to adjust. But okay, I'll let you know stakeholders are anxious about those regulations. I'm going to be cut off by the clock in a moment, I think, so I'm just going to read out some questions and perhaps we can discuss them in the next block. Can you update me on the staffing levels in occupational health and safety, specifically the ratio of officers per 100,000 workers, as well as the number of inspections, re-inspections, and investigations that you've seen so far? I would, there we go.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Appreciate that. This concludes the first portion of questions for the official opposition. We will now move to Government Caucus for 20 minutes of questions from members. Mr. Turton, you may begin with speaking up to 10 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Minister, do I have your permission to go back and forth?
Yes, you do.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming out here tonight. I appreciate your answers to Member Gray across. So obviously I have a lot of time spent in the labor movement as a 20-year member with Local 1325, and not only just being a part of the union, but being elected to senior positions. And I know I've been reaching out to a lot of my ex-colleagues, getting their perspective about many of the issues that are affecting obviously them. And so I guess kind of to kickstart us off, I want to start my questions off on page 80 of the business plan. And it says, under the performance metrics of 2A, we see that the lost time injury rate has seen an increase since 2017. Now, as I mentioned, spending considerable time out on industrial construction sites and serving on job safety boards and committees, and for years being responsible for the safety of the people that worked under me. I mean, this is obviously extremely important, and obviously we want to make sure that Alberta workplaces are safe, workers can go out, earn money, earn for their families, and obviously make it home. And so I guess my first question to you, Minister, is can you please elaborate on the effective prevention programs and the labor legislation that you plan to implement to help reduce the rate of occurrence? I don't think anyone would look at those numbers and say by them going up, that's a positive thing, but I know that there's programs in place that you're working on that can help make Albertans, have safer workplaces that they can, operate and work at. So just your thoughts, Minister.
The Minister.
Well, thank you very much for the question. You correctly point out health and safety is critically important. People, want to come. We need to have a system so that people can go home after their workday, and their workday is safe, and then go back to their families. So we have a number of programs that will be continuing and to run to be able to drive the lost time injury rate down. And I'll start off just before we talk about the programs, but that was part of the big changes that we made last fall when we were looking at changes we made to Occupational Health and Safety Act, which is really all about streamlining the act, providing the ability for workers and employers to work together, to spend their time identifying the risks and then addressing those risks in the workplace. Because at the end of the day, the primary responsibility is with employers and workers working together to make sure that their workplace is safe. And then we come in as Occupational Health and Safety with a number of programs to assist them in doing this, and I want to highlight a few of them. One example, for example, is our Certificate of Recognition program. Now, this program is a partnership between Labor and Immigration, industry, and the Workers' Compensation Board. And it's a voluntary program which builds on effective health and safety management systems so that workplace injuries and illnesses are reduced. There are currently over 10,400 cores held by Alberta employers, representing more than 40% of Alberta workplaces. And studies have shown that the core certification is associated with lower injury rates. So we continue to try to get more employers and employees involved in the core program. And this is a very rigorous program which actually looks at the processes that are in place at the work site. And then also how they're going to improve their performance. There's an evaluation, and then every 3 years there's a recertification of that. Another program that our department does is new employer visits. So every month, Labor and Immigration contacts new WCB account holders to provide occupational health and safety and employment standards information. And what this program really is about educating new employers about the occupational health and safety rules, but also the importance of having a focus on health and safety, and then where applicable, health and safety committees, and working together with employees to identify risks and then mitigate those risks. And during COVID-19 pandemic, we've had a number of virtual meetings arranged at the employer's convenience. And I can tell you in 2020-21, there were more than 1,400 new employer contacts. Another initiative that the Alberta government introduced in 2019, but we continue to work through this day, is trying to use evidence-based priorities for the OH system to identify basically those areas where there's high lost time injuries. And the 3 priority areas that were identified include musculoskeletal disorders due to repetitive use, slips, trips, and falls. I'm sure you're familiar with that in your workplaces. And then psychosocial hazards, including workplace violence and harassment. And so there are 3 working groups were established to work through these issues and identify best practices and guidelines so that employers and employees can work together to reduce them. So the Slips, Trips, and Falls Working Group released 8 resources related to winter cold hazards for slips and trips and falls. And in spring 2021, additional video presentations and resources and the psychosocial hazards and musculoskeletal disorders campaigns will be released, and that's coming soon. And we're also piloting an emerging issues project. And this process identifies and assesses emerging occupational health and safety issues, the associated risk in the Alberta OHS system, and determine the best course of actions. And actions related to emerging issues can range from resources development, proactive inspections, programs, surveillance, and research or stakeholder consultations. So this just provides a few of the programs that we have in place to be able to reduce that long-term injury, and we're continuing to develop more programs as we move forward. And this is a very dynamic, because it's constant process improvement, identifying where are the issues, and then how do we bring the stakeholders together to be able to develop, whether it be videos, whether it be training sessions, education, to be able to reduce them. Because at the end of the day, we want these numbers to go down. We want people to go home safe at the end of their workday.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for your response, Minister. I realize, even though you're not in the room here with us and you're in the next room, but when you started talking about putting forth constructive solutions to keep workers safe here in Alberta, you can almost see your grin from this room. So I appreciate the enthusiasm that you've had, Minister, especially on this file, because I know I've worked with you on a number of these initiatives. But unfortunately, we know that as safe as as many work sites are across the province, workers still unfortunately get hurt. And I can honestly speak from many conversations I've had with family members and friends and ex-colleagues and many residents of Spruce Grove and Stony Plain. Unfortunately, there are instances that we know where incidents happen at work and they do get hurt. But we also know that there's an appeals commission for Alberta workers that are taking issue with the Workers' Compensation Board. So my next question is really going to talk about the next part of that process. And so on page 80 of the business plan, on objective 3.4, it's to provide timely, fair, and efficient appeal services that are obviously independent of the Workers' Compensation Board through the Appeals Commission for workers, for Alberta workers. And obviously, we can understand I understand the importance of having that independent appeals process to be able to allow workers to escalate their own individual cases and make sure that they can get compensated appropriately. So, Minister, I guess my first question on this point is that can you please explain the process for the Appeals Commission and how it actually benefits Alberta workers that are forced to go down this path?
To the Minister.
Great. Well, thanks again so much for this question. As you know, the Appeals Commission is a quasi-judicial tribunal that is the final level of appeal for workers' compensation matters in the province. And workers and employers who disagree with the WCB decision can appeal to the Appeals Commission. Now, it's committed to efficient processes that recognize the importance of natural justice and procedural timelines. For example, the right to representation and the right to know the case to be heard. And timely decision-making is supported by performance targets and a decision timeline policy. And the quality of decisions is measured by the performance targets relating to the percentage of Appeals Commission decisions reviewed and either upheld or overturned by the courts, the Ombudsman, or the Appeals Commission's internal reconsideration process. Now, the Appeals Commission operates freely of influence from the WCB and is arm's length from the government, but it really provides an independent final stop for employees and employers who may disagree about the application of the WCB, this important insurance program.
Mr. Turton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, this is such an important part of this process because for many workers that are going down there, we want to make sure that we have consistency, we have reliability. Many times it's like reaching into a hat, pulling out a rabbit, wondering what are you going to get. And we want to make sure that workers know exactly the steps that they have to do to go down this process. And so given the funding restraints of the government as a whole, I was wondering, how will the ministry ensure that this independent commission will be working effectively and fairly, be supported so that's sustainable in the long term, and workers don't have to worry about this valuable tool, might be taken away, and that it's something that they can depend on.
The Minister.
Well, great question. Thank you. And we made a step in that direction towards changes we made last fall when we made changes to the workers' compensation system. Two of those changes are we eliminated the FPO and the MPO, and these because what we had beforehand were three separate offices, independent offices that dealt with issues in terms of whether or not a claim should be upheld or not be upheld, and we looked around the country. All other provinces had only the one appeals commission, one independent office to do that. So what we did is we combined the key core functions from the medical panels office and the fair practices office, those core functions into the appeals commission, and we made the appeals commissioner, in essence, at the high level, responsible for the overall process. And this does two things. First thing, what it does is it reduces the overall cost associated with the appeals process. But also what it does is because the appeals commissioner at the end of the day now is actually be able to look at the entire appeal process, including how to integrate the decisions from medical panels into the overall process. We're looking to streamline that. In addition, as we are currently undertaking a review of the entire process from basically from stem to stern in terms of once there's a dispute from a claim, and then how does that get assessed, adjudicated, including medical panels, the medical panel process all the way to the end, and that is currently being undertaken. But the reason for that is we want to reduce the time. So we want to maintain fairness, but reduce the time because, quite frankly, the longer that these cases drag out, it's bad for the employee because they don't have certainty in terms of whether what benefits they're going to get. And then it also tends to be the longer that you have someone who is hurt and doesn't get back into the workplace, then not only is there increased cost, but then they're not back getting the work done that they need to get done. And then you can also have slip into other issues in regards to depression and it spirals out of control. So we're also undertaking a process to be able to say, what are the best practices out there that we can get adjudication done quickly, always fairly, but done quickly. But really our target is in our approach is how do we get that employee, address the issues that they have and get them back to work. And so these changes that we made in the last legislation will assist that, and we're continuing to look at the process to improve it.
Mr. Abbott.
Yes, thank you very much, Minister. Yeah, and I'm thankful that you mentioned the term mental health, because obviously, as has already been referenced, I know by Emily Gray, I mean, COVID-19 and the effects of the pandemic obviously has wide-ranging repercussions, and mental health is so big. And for many of the workers that are going down this path, and due to an accident, obviously we want to make sure that mental health aspect is looked after. They're under a great deal of stress, and so is their family. So I'm very thankful for the work that you've been doing on this. So I guess my next question has to deal with the Alberta Labour Relations Board. And obviously, in my time at Local 1325, this was obviously something that came up quite a bit. I know in the last year alone that there have been hundreds of rulings by the Alberta, thousands of workers and hundreds of companies right across the province. And so, really, my question revolves about key objective 3.3 on the business plan. And it talks about providing efficient, timely, and effective and consistent services through the Alberta Labour Relations Board. Again, back to my prior point about just giving that line of sight, that consistency for Albertans and for workers so that they can actually know the system, the process, and there's no surprises. So my first question about this is, how does the department work with the Alberta Labour Relations Board to provide that effective and efficient services to Albertans? Again, being that system and that process that they can depend on, so there's no surprises, and obviously I know this is a key part of your ministry.
The Minister.
Great. Well, thanks again for the question. As you know, the Alberta Labour Relations Board is an independent and impartial tribunal, and it's really responsible for the day-to-day application of and interpretation of Alberta's labor code and our bargaining laws. So they process applications, hold hearings, adjudicate disputes, actively encourage dispute resolution, and makes major policy decisions within their bailiwick. So while the Alberta Labour Relations Board falls under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Labour, it truly is an arm's length tribunal and maintains its independence from the department. That said, we did make a change in Bill 47 to help drive effective and efficient services. And it may seem like a small change, but it was an important change to me. We made a change in the preamble, and we added one small word, which is the term expedient, to the preamble, so that it now reads that, and I'm paraphrasing, but I'll quote the one part of it, that the Alberta Labour Relations Board will provide, quote, fair and equitable and expedient resolution of matters. And this is important because it signals not only to the Alberta Labour Relations Board through the legislation and also the labour community that the board needs to continue to drive, and they've been working on this, and I've seen this, but continue to drive to have efficient hearings and use a number of tools at their disposal to try to reduce not only the amount of time in the hearing, so they get to the nub of the issue if they can't resolve it ahead of time, and the board's been really good at pre-hearing conferences, but to try and then have a quick decision after so that we can get justice out. And then we also continue to have a series of metrics that they report to us in terms of the time to hearings that we talked about earlier, and also the percentage hearings written within 90 days. But it's up to the board to put its processes in place because they're independent, but we can provide some direction through the legislation, which we did in the most recent change that we did this fall.
Mr. Turton.
Yes, thank you, Minister. And I guess just a quick supplemental popped in my head about when you talked about the collaboration that you have with these arm's length agencies. And I guess I was hoping to get a little bit more feedback about how you and your ministry obviously ensure effective and productive collaboration with this group while maintaining obviously its independence to be able to do the amazing work that it has to do. But obviously, I know, again, because it is so high, it's ranked right on your key objectives about making sure that there's effective, conversations back and forth. So I guess I was just hoping to get a little bit better perspective about how you, how you can help promote that productive collaboration between your ministry and the Alberta Labour Relations Board.
Sorry?
is my apologies, Chair. I think a great example is the changes that we made to the labor relations code when we actually added to the preamble in Bill 47. You would go. We did consultation ahead of time in terms of what were the issues, because the way that we and then we can actually make changes to the code from what we're hearing from the community in terms of not only what's working for the laws that apply to the community broadly in terms of labor relations functions, but actually how the board actually operates and the processes that they have, and then we actually change the laws to do that. So I think it's a broader consultation process that we use and then change through the act, and then ongoing reports in regards to how the board is functioning, whether it be the Labor Relations Board or the appeals commissions. But again, at the end of the day, these are arm's length bodies. Our job is to set the legislation, set the regulation for them to operate, and then their job is to operate at a distance and make independent quasi-judicial decisions. But by ongoing consultation with the community, we can identify issues and then make changes to be able to improve the efficiency.
Yes. Well, thank you again, Minister, for at least highlighting the arm's length part of the conversation, because I know that's an extremely important part for workers here in Alberta. I guess my last question I have is on page 80 of the business plan. Your ministry mentions $4 million being allocated to the Alberta Labor Relations Board, and I guess my question has to deal with how do you actually highlight how this amount was determined, and was there consultation? And I guess a further question I have is this an appropriate amount of money to be, allocated towards the board? Maybe just kind of describe it in terms of, your thoughts on the funding perspective.
Minister, you have to be quick as a rabbit. You got 20 seconds.
No, a little bit more. The board does tons of work, and we've also increased their workload. So if you actually compare from previous years and what they're doing, we're always looking for, with any of our boards, we're looking for operational efficiencies in terms of that. But at the same time, we need to recognize that workload changes and need.
Sorry to interrupt, Minister. We will now have a very short 5-minute break. I apologize for not giving advance warning of that, but we will have 5 minutes, and then we will resume with a 10-minute block for the official opposition. If you can reconvene at exactly 8:41, that would be appreciated. Thank you. up to 5 minutes maximum. And Ms. Gray, is it coming back to you?
Yes, please.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. And Minister, when we last spoke, I shouted some OHS stats questions at you, and I'm wondering if you've had a moment to look those up.
So in regards to number of OH officers, technical staff, and partnership consultants, and in terms of the officers, for 2021, there's 148 officers. And just give you a frame of reference, in 17-18 there was 140, 142 in 2018-19, 150 in 2019-20, and 148 in 2021.
So going back down in the wrong direction, but 148, okay, thank you very much. Were you able to find the number of inspections, re-inspections, and investigations?
So for 2020-21, number of inspections, 12,746, and 2,718, and that is as of February 9th, 2021. So it's not it's
Understood. Okay. Was that complete, Minister? No. I'll turn it back.
1920, there was 9,624 number of inspections and 2,921 re-inspections.
Okay. Thank you for that update on the stats, Minister. I note in your budget, your line item 3.2 for occupational health and safety is getting a cut of 7.6%, and employment standards a cut by over 15%, 16.7%. You've mentioned the number of OHS officers potentially decreasing, that ratio that we were talking about. Within those departments, if you could elaborate on the spending reductions in each of those two line items, particularly during a pandemic, when health and safety, as well as minimum employment standards and protecting workers, has been incredibly important. I'd like to better understand those cuts.
So for the, happy to do so. Again, our approach is looking for operational efficiencies where we can maintain the service at the front line, even though we're reducing our spend. And because just you can't do a direct relation necessarily of spend to the service. I can tell you that we are maintaining our frontline employees, so those who are providing doing the inspections, the investigations, et cetera. And a lot of our changes, I would broad in both these cases, and I'll get to. There's some detail in regards to the health and safety. But for the most part, if you look at our budget, you'll see on a lot of our budget items, you'll see some decreases. Almost all of those decreases are associated with what we're calling operational efficiencies. That includes reductions in wages when we have individuals who are, for example, in that shop who leave. We're not backfilling. We're also looking at often changes to supply and services. Some of them related to travel. That we're not doing as much travel anymore. So when we talk about operational efficiencies, that's for the most part, that's what that type of stuff is. But again, our focus is on providing same or better service. Now, when it comes to the OHS system, one other thing is that there was a couple of other items that were projects that came to an end. So, for example, the CORS IT project or the Farm Health and Safety Producer Grant. Those things also came to an end. So that provides for some of that reduction as well.
Ms. Gray?
I think you might have just answered my one of my future questions, which is the funding to AgSafe. I think you just said that it was scheduled to end in 2020, but that has not been renewed, so Labour is no longer providing that. I see you shaking your head. I will accept that as an answer. And under the topic of occupational health and safety, I found your 3-year OHS code review plan, which I know it took some time to get sorted out. So I have 2 questions on this plan. First is that year 1 of the OHS code review is scheduled to end March 2021. So can we anticipate that first batch of changes to be implemented? And I'm curious about that consultation piece. The advisory council, I hope, was involved through that. Maybe I'll just stop there, let you answer that, and then I'll ask a second question.
The Minister?
So I'm just pulling up my my year 1. We are actually going out with a consultation package in the very, very near future. So we've done initial working groups with a number of the items that are doing that actually that have working groups associated with them. Some of the items are associated with the changes that we made in the legislation. So we're going out with a consultation package very shortly, within weeks, to have more input. Because as you know, there's a number of working groups. They'll provide a bunch of input in terms of what it should look like, and then historically we've gone out with that input saying, hey, this is what we think we're doing. We get further input to say, is this right? And then we go back and make the changes. So we may not get the changes done by March 31st of this year, but we're going to start the consultation very shortly. And we were held up a little bit with COVID-19. Makes it just a little more challenging to get through this. But we are but those items are on our list in terms of consultation, and they'll be coming out soon.
Ms. Gray?
Minister, I note that Part 29 Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System is in the 3rd year, and those WHMIS pieces of the Occupational Health and Safety Code, if I recall, are incredibly important to a number of different industries and businesses, especially when it comes to standardization with other jurisdictions. And so I suppose I will just make a comment that are you at all concerned that this item is in the 3rd year? And then I will also just make a comment that I see you're consulting on the violence and harassment pieces, and I will be very curious to see the outcome and the impact it will have on Alberta workers.
To the Minister.
So 2 things. So when we actually looked at this list, we looked at the list in terms of through a number of lenses of what we were going to do first. And the high priority is that stuff where there was higher concern with this. So the first list, plus stuff that was items that were impacted by changes to the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So that made the first bucket. So the things in the lower bucket from the assessment was from stakeholders that this is of that's not saying it's not important. Don't get me wrong. But it's of less concern to change now. But I can tell you that our approach to the change is looking at how do we update that, these to make sure the standards are correct, because as you know, CSA standards change on a regular basis, so we want to make sure that they're updated. We're also looking through the lens from red tape reduction, but red tape reduction also includes standardization, because as you know, if you have one standard applies in Saskatchewan and one in Alberta, and you have an individual who gets trained differently, and then they forget which jurisdiction they are, they do something wrong, you actually create greater risk than having it standardized. So that is a lens that we're taking a look at it. And then also an opportunity to provide opportunities where it makes sense. And some of this, it doesn't make sense, but where it makes sense, where employers and employees can identify other ways to reach the same outcome, but without the same approach. And then, but we can only apply flexibility, but our intent is to go and do that. I can say just even though we've highlighted it, Part 27, violence and harassment, that one we're not going to go out with quite yet. We got a little more work to do on it, and so that will be coming out, still coming out in 21, but not in the first package.
20 seconds or so.
Then with only 20 seconds left, I will just say the Occupational Health and Safety System Prevention Initiative for Alberta. My next question will just be around how that work adjusted with COVID-19 because the report was vague.
Thank you, Ms. Gray, and thank you, Minister. We will now move to Government Caucus. Mr. Roswell, you have up to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for your presence here, Minister. On page 79, key objective 1.4, it identifies the ministry's intention to support job creators. And I know you've talked and touched on parts of this already, but I'd just like to have you expand a bit on how job creators will be supported, and maybe with an emphasis on rural versus urban. If there's a difference, or if there's not, then that's fine, but I'd just like to expand on that part of it.
To the Minister.
So, well, thanks so much. And as you're right, we touched on a little bit before. We have the first item that we did to be able to support job creators is changing in our legislation. To reduce red tape, to reduce the cost of employment, while at the same time maintaining protections for workers, to actually make workplaces safer and enable employers to do that. So, changes we made to employment standard, changes we made to occupational health and safety, all of that, provides it goes towards reduction of red tape and to make it easier for employers to hire and employ Albertans. I'm actually very excited, and we talked about this before, about the Alberta Jobs Now program, and being able to announce announcement in the near future, because that's another program that will help not only employers hire Albertans who are unemployed, but also help defray the cost of bringing new people on and training them and providing the skills that they need to do that. And that's going to be available to employers across the province. In regards to the other thing I'll also highlight is one of the programs we have is the Canada Alberta Job Grant, which provides funding for employers to train employees. And we actually made some changes during COVID-19 to make it easier, particularly for smaller businesses, to access that program. And so again, that's another help for employers. In regards to rural versus urban, one of the things that I'm going to, on the immigration side, that we're doing is the rural entrepreneur stream. That's still in the hopper, and we will be looking forward to announcing this upcoming year. And really, that's about to bring rural entrepreneurs to buy businesses in rural Alberta or open businesses in rural Alberta to create jobs for themselves and others. And then we're also looking at, and again, we're going to have to just watch the timing of this given COVID-19, but the rural renewal stream, which is part of our Alberta Advantage immigration strategy. And that stream is targeting, for example, like veterinarians, where we actually have a shortage of veterinarians in Alberta. And even though we're working very hard with Minister of Advanced Education, be able to provide, be able to ensure we can train vets in here, we can't train them fast enough. We have a shortage coming, and so rural renewal immigration stream can bring people like vets into rural Alberta, because that's going to be critical for our growth in our ag sector. Because as you know, veterinarians play such a key role in our food supply chain.
Has has the recognition of their credentials for the vets specifically, has that been a problem? To get that recognition of their credentials?
To the Minister.
So our Fairness for Newcomers office is working with the Vets Association, and I can tell you that I've had ongoing conversations with them, including the University of Calgary, to say, can we use them as a potential pilot when we launch our rural renewal program, because we recognize that if you are going to invite newcomers in, sort of vets from other countries, then ideally you want to identify a clear path to getting accreditation, because invite someone in and have them spin their wheels for years and years without being able to work doesn't make any sense. So it's working with everyone involved to say, okay, how do we attract vets from other countries, but how do we make the fastest pass to accreditation? And so we're in ongoing conversations of that, because I look at inviting newcomers is like when you hire someone new to your organization. You want to be welcoming, and you really measure that on not only if they stay and they feel like they're productive, but they're being productive and they're productive as quickly as possible. And you measure that, and we need to look at our immigration system the same way. And I think there's an opportunity to do this, and a great opportunity with the Alberta Rural Renewal Program.
Okay, great. That's good to hear. Great. On page 77, the ministry business plan, it states ministry collaborates with advanced education, community and social services, and indigenous relations to deliver career supports and training programs to develop and retain talent to support Alberta's economy. Can you provide examples of how these partnerships, like how you are partnering with these various ministries?
To the minister.
Well, thank you very much for the question. We work quite closely with these ministries. One of the first things we work with them is that, funding comes through a number of grants from the federal government. And we talked about some of the funding that we use within labor and immigration to fund the Canada-Alberta Job Grant, for example, the program that I mentioned. So we receive funding, and it's labor and immigration is responsible for negotiation with the federal government in this. But this funding is shared with advanced education, with Indigenous relations, and with community and social services, and really to provide employment opportunities for different target groups to get all Albertans working. Our department focuses on, for the most part, we focus on those who are closer to the job market to be able to train and retrain. We do have some programs for Indigenous peoples, but Indigenous Relations also runs programs for Indigenous peoples to provide skill sets, and sometimes it's those further removed from the job market, so they need core skill sets initially in terms of how to work, and then they can get technical skill sets in terms of for the particular job. Move forward. So we work very closely with Indigenous Relations on that. Community and social services, similarly, they have some individuals who are further away from the job market and need upgrading and sort of skill sets, so they'll provide service of that, and then we will come in after and provide that. And similarly with advanced education in terms of supports for individuals who are going through school to do that. So we support all Albertans in terms of getting to work. We target different in groups. And we ensure that our training programs that we provide in all four ministries don't compete with each other. That we are there, we're collaboratively and we're complementary as well.
Well, that's good. I'm on the Premier's Council for the Status of People with Disability, and they've just gone through a strategic planning process. And one of they wanted to narrow down what they were focusing on, and one of them was employment. And so, that's, I don't know if that come up in your discussions or not, but that's part of their strategic plan, is to make sure that disabled people can participate in the workforce. Yeah, good. On page 80 of the business plan, key objective 2.3 mentions collaborative work with employers and employees to promote the compliance with employment standards. The ministry will do so by providing support and timely complaint resolution, effective enforcement assistance to vulnerable workers. Can the ministry elaborate on the kinds of assistance that you'll be providing to vulnerable workers, and maybe you can describe what a vulnerable worker is?
Minister.
Thanks so much for the question. So, vulnerable workers include, young workers and foreign workers, and our department plays a role in educating them and their employers about rights and responsibilities, restrictions while working in Alberta, and resolving disputes regarding unfair, unsafe, or unhealthy working conditions. We also provide supports to temporary foreign workers through the Temporary Foreign Worker Advisory Office, and these supports include referrals to other jurisdictions or partners where there's suspected human trafficking or labor trafficking, and assisting with work permits applications to the federal government. And we also collaborate with other federal, provincial, municipal, and community partners during investigations and inspections to support these vulnerable workers, primarily youth and foreign workers who are caught in, whether it be human trafficking or labor trafficking, and get the support and the services that they need to get out, and then help them, perhaps, even working with the federal government to get them another job with another employer.
Okay, thank you. How much time I got left?
About 5 seconds.
No, okay. I'll stop there then.
Thank you, Mr. Roswell. Now to Mr. Nielsen for a 10-minute block.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hopefully the minister is still willing to go back and forth. Take that as a yes.
Happy to do so.
Great. So obviously last block, talking about one of my favorite subjects, red tape. And I, of course, noticed on page 78, right near the bottom there, it seems to be a standard line throughout every single ministry about as part of this ongoing review, the ministry is committed to making life easier for hardworking Albertans and job creators while reducing regulatory requirements by 1/3 by 2023 and eliminating administrative burden through more efficient processes. I did notice that that was exactly word for word throughout every single ministry's opening remarks. But through the discussions that I've heard here this evening, there was just a couple of loose kind of questions that I've seen come up outside of the ones that I do want to ask. And so one of them revolves around, of course, the labor board, and so specifically looking at metrics around on page 80 for 3B. And I guess maybe a little bit of the lack of metrics. And the reason I asked this, Minister, from personal experience, I've seen very, very large corporations that, again, using my own life experience, where my colleagues and I did go on strike. The employer was able to get a hearing within the labor board within 24 hours, and yet I know that the union, UFCW, has never been able to get a meeting within 24 hours. So I'm just kind of wondering what kind of red tape you're looking at through this to try to maybe equalize that a little bit.
Mr. Minister.
Well, thanks for the question. As I indicated, we have measures in place, and even though in the business plan we have one measure associated with targets in regards to the timeliness of decisions, so 90 days and a target of 85%, we still monitor other measures, including the time to get a hearing. And we also include a number, not only this, but we can include more measures in our annual report so that, people can see how we're doing. In relation to, the performance of the Alberta Labor Relations Board, they are as I indicated earlier in our conversations tonight, they are a quasi-judicial body, so they operate at arm's length. We did put changes in the preamble. One of it is to be able to have, one of the principles is expedient processes to resolve disputes. And so, we look to the board to continue to be able to improve on their ability to have, hearings in an expedient manner, and then also get decisions out quickly, but also fair.
Mr. Nielsen.
Thanks, Mr. And so one of the other things you had brought up that you were working on, Member Gray had talked about things like the WHMIS program and standardizing across the provinces and whatnot. I guess what I'm wondering is I know in the beginning the government had kind of reduced some red tape, crossing fingers a little bit, hoping that other provinces would follow suit. What has been the response from other provinces with regards to the work that you're trying to do to standardize are you finding it to be amicable, or are they pushing back? What are you finding there?
Minister.
Apologies, Chair. Actually, it is quite amicable. There's I sit on a group of federal, provincial ministers who are focused on who are responsible for occupational health and safety, and we had a meeting 2 weeks ago where we actually identified a number of items that we want to standardize across the entire country, and that we have a working group focused on that. Because there is a recognition that having standardization is important, because as I indicated before, having two different sets of rules and you have employees working across different jurisdictions, that actually can create a hazard. So having standardized rules across is helpful. And in our code review, and you'll see when we roll this out in terms of our consultation coming, where we are making mention to standards that are across the country, and we're moving towards that because we think that that is safer and really reduces red tape for employers.
Mr. Nielsen?
Thank you, Minister. So that was kind of my loose end questions here. So now I'm getting back here, back onto page 80 here, performance metrics 3A for red tape reduction. You had mentioned in your very opening remarks, and I just wanted to quickly clarify, you had said a number, I believe 4% reduction. Was that in reference to this past year, or is that just the reference made here on 3A, which was actually 3.6%?
Minister?
Sure. Yeah, so the reference to the 4% was actually if you took the core budget for labor and immigration, and you can next year, and you compared it to this year, it's a 4% reduction overall. That's what that refers to, because it's hard to see this in the budget numbers because we have special programs last year, which was above and beyond our 210 million, and then we have special programs in the upcoming fiscal year, again, which is above and beyond our typical programming, like the Alberta Jobs Now program, for example, that's in place. And so I wanted to be able to provide some comparison in terms of when we take the COVID stuff out and you just look at our core budget, it's about a 4% reduction. But again, we're achieving that through operational efficiencies, but still maintaining the services that we provide.
Mr. Nielsen?
So as you're aware, and with the budget, there was a slight reduction within the Ministry of Red Tape. It was, in last year's budget, projected to be about $13 million over the course of this term. It's down to about 10.3. And so with each ministry, obviously there's some responsibilities with red tape reduction. I'm just wondering how many staff or I guess staff hours have been dedicated to the policy of red tape reduction within the ministry. How much has been dedicated there?
Minister?
I don't think we have it broken down that way in terms of, my understanding is we haven't identified staff per se to just do red tape. This is part of our day-to-day job. It's like health and safety. It's part of your day-to-day job in terms of your operations. So we haven't dedicated staff per se to be able to do full-time just doing red tape reduction. I can tell you that we are working towards our regulatory count reduction, as well as reducing the red tape for employers, and we'll continue to do so.
So there hasn't been any kind of a budget, I guess, established specifically for red tape reduction within the Ministry of Labour and Immigration? Oh, okay, sorry, I just didn't want to make sure that there wasn't something else coming there, so thanks. So I guess that leads into my next one. So on page 80, and I guess also referencing the red tape reduction annual report that was tabled, specifically around page 8. There was a baseline count of 670,977 different regulatory requirements across government. And so under your performance metrics in 3A, I noted that there was no baseline count referenced like there is in some other ministries. And so I'm just wondering if you know what the baseline count has been in the Ministry of Labour and Immigration.
Minister?
So for labor and immigration, the baseline count is 24,625. However, that doesn't include all the ABCs. So that includes the Labor Relations Board, and the Appeals Commission, and they're finalizing their counts right now.
Mr. Nielsen?
Okay, and so based on that, obviously in 2019, 2020, you had reduced by 3.6%. Is there a number for 2020, 21, or is that coming?
Minister?
The most up-to-date information we have is, as of December 31st, 2020, is 6.55%.
Okay, perfect. I guess that now jumps me over to the critical worker.
Sorry, Mr. Nielsen, that's the end of your time. We will now go back to Government Caucus. Mr. Tour, you have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Minister, and thank you for all the work you're doing. Thank you to your department. A lot of information. And I want to start with page 79 of the ministry's business plan. And if you look at the key objective at 1.6, it outlines the ministry's focus to ensure Alberta's professional regulatory bodies adhere to the principles in the Fair Registration Practices Act and continue to implement the Fairness for the Newcomers Plan. Can the minister please elaborate on how the office will work closely with the professional regulatory organizations?
Minister?
Well, thank you so much, Member Tour, for the question. As you know, the Fair Registration Practices Office was set up a year ago. And they commenced their work working with professional organizations, and really for the past year, it's been creating baseline data, understanding, as you may recall, under the Act, there was a number of requirements, one of which was including that they needed to have a decision once all the information was provided within 6 months. And the decision was either yes, no, but also if it wasn't that, then here's what you need to do to get accredited, because we, as you know, we had heard from a number of newcomers that they would go, they'd make applications, they'd get the runaround, they weren't sure what they were able to do. So this addressed that. Plus, there needed to be a clear appeal process, and their systems need to be efficient and fair. So the past year, the Fairness for Newcomers offices have been working with PROs, understanding how many newcomers are applying, how long is it taking them to get to respond, and do they actually have a fair and efficient appeals process. So they've done that now. The next year, what they're going to be focusing on is saying, okay, how do we improve these processes and make them more efficient, and then how do we continue to reduce barriers for newcomers coming? Because at the end of the day, we invite these newcomers to come to Canada. We invite them because of the skill sets that they have, because we want them to apply their skill sets. Now we need to make it easy for them to do that with a clear path forward. Still maintaining, and this is up to the PROs, the safety and the high standards that Albertans have come to expect and Canadians have come to expect from them. But at the same time, because we're inviting them for their skills, we need to make it easy for them to be able to find a path forward, get recognized, and then get to work. Because at the end of the day, by having newcomers get to work, not only creates jobs for themselves, but it creates jobs for other Albertans.
Thank you, Mr. Look at the page 77 of the business plan. It identifies that the ministry deliver programs and services to help newcomers settle and integrate in order to contribute to the Alberta economy, including pre-arrival settlement services, offering skills, upgrading to underemployed foreign professionals, and providing access to bridge financing for certification exams, and assessing foreign credentials received outside of Canada through the International Qualification Assessment Services. To allow new Albertans to fully participate in Alberta's economy, utilizing their education, knowledge, skills, and experience. Can you please advise an update on these efforts in the past year?
Well, thank you so much for the question again, I'd like to maybe touch on, our, it's a couple of key elements of our Fairness for Newcomers plan. As you know, we ran on a platform of making it easier for newcomers to come to Alberta and welcome them and this is going to be a cornerstone for our economic recovery. So one commitment that we made a part of our plan is in regards to pre-arrival services. And because the ideal, as I mentioned earlier, is at the end is that before someone even once they apply, but before they come to Alberta, they can even start the process for getting their accreditation and their qualifications. But to do that, they need to know what this is, what to expect when they get here. And so we have provided pre-arrival information to provincial nominees of the AINP, our programs, prior to their arrival to Alberta. And we're also in the process of partnering with the federal government so that for individuals who are coming through federal programs, who are coming to Alberta, that we can provide the same information. Now, this early contact will support these individuals to have a smoother transition once they get here to Alberta, and ultimately to help them settle in our communities more effectively and get to work faster. So that's on the pre-arrival services. When we talk about skills upgrading for underemployed foreign professionals, we've also done some work in this regard. Through this fiscal year, our partners will implement the Alberta Settlement Integration Program funded project proposals, and these were approved in March 2021, to address newcomer unemployment through training in occupation-specific language skills, workplace culture, intercultural communications, sector-specific training, such as information technology, healthcare, and supply chain management. And that's in line item 2.1 of our program. These services for skilled unemployed professionals were also procured under the Training for Work program with a focus on foreign trained professionals impacted by the downturn in the energy sector. We've also provided bridge financing for certification exams. As indicated earlier, we've expanded the ability for newcomers to access micro loans. In November 2020, a microloans pilot program was delivered by Service Credit Union and by Brendan Center for Learning to offer low-interest loans to immigrant professionals who need bridge financing to upgrade their skills and to pay for certification exams. There's been a target of 450 loans over 3 years from 2020 to 23 has been set for the pilot. And we also extended our agreement with Windmill Microlending to be able to continue to do that great work that they're doing there. And the last thing I just want to talk to is in regards to International Qualification Assessment Service. We run a service through the Alberta government, and we've reduced our processing times for all applicants as a result of a pause on the immigration applications implemented in 2019. And then we've reduced the time from 23 now to 6 weeks. And the processing time for immigration applicants has been reduced from 24 to 14 weeks. And by changing our processes and highlighting those newcomers who are coming to Alberta, Alberta applicants requesting an assessment for an employer hiring purposes will be expedited and processed in 5 business days. And Alberta applicants requesting an assessment for obtaining professional licensure are now processed in 15 days. So we've done a tremendous amount of work to try to support newcomers coming to Alberta and under IQOS for those who are coming here to reduce the times so they can actually get that one piece of information, as you know, which is so critically important on the path to certification.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for all the great work you're doing it. I can certainly say that the newcomers will appreciate that. And my next question is, I think if you look at page 164, line item 2.6 in the estimate document, it refers to labor support and is described as support for Alberta employers and their employees to gain the skills they need to succeed in the workforce, including through the Canada-Alberta Job Grant. And can you please discuss any recent changes to this job grant to help businesses access the training they need during the, I guess, challenging economic environment?
Minister, you have about 1 minute, 30 seconds.
That's a great question. But we've already talked about the Canada-Alberta Job Grant, so I won't describe what it is. But during COVID-19, we made some changes to make it more accessible. These include eligible training now includes employed family members of eligible employers. Business owners can now, with 4 or fewer employees, including all owners, are now eligible for training. And training is no longer required to be incremental, meaning training that is required for the job is now eligible for funding. So we made it more wide open so training can provide to more people and keep people working through this pandemic.
Thank you.
Mr. Tour?
How much time I have left, Chair?
You have about 50 seconds.
Okay, I'll try to read one question. Did you say 15 or 50? No, I think it's 15.
Yeah, 4-0. 4-0.
Okay, thanks. I think I'll leave it. I can try, but I can leave it.
Fair enough. We will move on to the opposition caucus. Mr. Nielsen again, or back to Ms. Gray?
Yeah, just one quick question to the Minister, and then I'll pass the remaining time over to Emily Gray. So, Minister, what kind of resources or funding is available from the Ministry of Red Tape Reduction with which the Ministry of Labour and Immigration can access to move forward on its efforts with red tape reduction?
Go ahead, Minister.
So the Ministry of Red Tape Reduction basically is that they don't provide funding, but what they do provide is they go out. There's a number of roundtables that are held. They collate a number of ideas from that we're getting it from all Albertans, Alberta employers, and then they provide that to the ministry, such as Labour and Immigration, which we can then assess.
Mr. Nielsen?
Maybe then just one other quick follow-up. Is it possible to get a list of some of the groups that have been consulted on with regards to red tape reduction and the advice that they've given to the Ministry of Labour?
Minister.
Yeah, we have consulted, widely. Not only ourselves received submissions directly, but we received submissions through the red tape Minister for Red Tape Reduction.
Okay. Ms. Gray.
Thank you very much. I would like to talk just a little bit more about the Appeals Commission and what's happening with the Fair Practices Office and the MPO, jumping off of some of the questions MLA Turton was asking. And in talking about what the Appeals Commissioner, looking at the whole process, Minister, you talked about this is going to do two great things, but I would like to submit that it's going to do one not so great thing, and that is there were certainly some issues that we heard from the in-depth consultations we did around trust and the institutional neutrality being maintained between the advisory role and the adjudicative role. Now they're combined. They both report through that single commissioner, and the separation and the independence were a cause for concern during the consultations. And so my question to you is, because of the potential to negatively impact public trust, how are you going to make sure that that institutional neutrality is kept in place? Are there mechanisms? Is there something you can do to fix that?
Minister?
So as I understand, there was a concern associated with that, but that's because the advisory services were under WCB, right? So, and I appreciate, WCB was the same organization that was making the decision. Now, the Appeals Commission is independent. It is separate, right? And so instead of taking those advisory services are no longer in the WCB, we put them to the Appeals Commission. So I think that addresses the problem because it is an independent body. It is separate from the WCB. It's not under the same board. It's under a separate appeals commissioner. It is a quasi-judicial body designed to make decisions, and now they are responsible. So I think I think the original concern that was flagged when the original assessment was done, because some of these advisory services weren't under the Appeals Commission, but rather under the WCB. We didn't put them back there on purpose. And I recollect, and it may be a little fuzzy now because it was only 4 months ago, but lots happened since then. But I think that the original panel didn't suggest that we set up 3 separate offices, right? But I may have that wrong. But I do know that when we looked at other jurisdictions, they do not have 3 separate offices. They have one, an Appeals Commission. And it is independent. So I believe that will address the concerns.
That's great.
Thank you, Minister. I'm speaking more to that concern about the advisory role from that Fair Practices Office and then the adjudicative role in the appeals commissioner, and the lawyers and the judges, or I don't know what comparison to make, but that particular place, and really I'm hearing you say that that kind of protection or neutrality isn't on your radar at this moment. So I would suggest that you consider that and the impact it may have on the system. I'm going to jump topics because we're into those last couple blocks where we're trying to get through and make sure we've asked everything we wanted to get onto the record. At our last estimates, we discussed at length the importance of OHS officers being able to check valid apprenticeship or trade certifications, both to improve worker safety, increase compliance, and save government from having to send two different workers out to a work site to check different aspects. At the time, you weren't certain what was happening with that change, and you were going to take a look into it. Are OHS officers still not checking trade tickets while they're on sites?
Minister?
My understanding is they are not.
And do you have a good reason for that? Because it seems to me that for safety reasons, for compliance reasons, for efficiency reasons, and for the fact that other jurisdictions have moved in that direction, it is only a detrimental decision to not have OHS officers able to also do that when they happen to also be on site. So if you could explain to me why they are not, I would appreciate it.
Minister?
My understanding, this is a high level understanding in terms of our conversation with Advanced Education, who actually is responsible for many of the trade certificates, that it was that two things. One is they have people who are involved in this, and then secondly, from an occupational health and safety standpoint, my understanding is that that the time that it took to actually continue to look at all these things at the same time that they're there, versus the issues with compliance or lack of compliance, and then they can spend their time on other things which are higher risk, that it was more valuable. So then the decision was made that we wouldn't continue to spend our time on that basis.
Ms. Gray?
Okay, I appreciate the explanation. It leaves me curious, but I will leave that there. I wrote down a note. You said that you were undertaking a review involving the Appeals Commission. I just wanted to emphasize, will your review be talking to workers and users of the system to gather their input? Because they're a difficult group to pin down and engage fulsomely in consultation, but their voices are critically important within that system.
Minister?
Yeah, our focus is on an internal review of all the people within the system. So it's looking at from stem to stern in terms of people who are coming in, and then where are the choke points in the system.
All right, thank you. Within the Alberta Jobs Now program, which I realize you will be announcing in the near future, we certainly hope, have you considered youth unemployment rates? And unfortunately right now we're seeing 1 in 4 youth are looking for work. Will Alberta Jobs Now speak to that demographic as well?
Minister?
We appreciate and fully appreciate the impact that the COVID-19 and the recession Alberta's had on youth, and we are targeting our Alberta Jobs Now for all individuals who are unemployed.
That's great.
Okay. Thank you for that. Again, a bit of a topic shift. I apologize for the whiplash. Employee Labor Relations Support Program. I'm curious about this new program that was initiated by your government and how many requests for information via the website and calls that line continues to get.
Minister?
I have that. Just one second. So to date, we've had 46 emails, 1 Alberta Connects inquiry, and 56 phone calls.
That's great.
Thank you very much. And so when you're talking about operational efficiency, I understand that this work is being undertaken by labor staff who are also doing other things as well, because that's an incredibly low amount of use for this particular support line.
Minister?
That is correct. We don't have a separate staff. This is an individual who does this as part of, and then they have other work in addition to this.
Okay, thank you. 36 seconds, then I will just ask, off of your expense by vote by program, I'm noticing a nearly 20% reduction in the policy and labor market information. Can you tell me what is changing within that line item?
Minister?
So again, this has to do with operational efficiencies, which includes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Minister. You will have to save that for the next block. We will now go back to Government Caucus. Ms. Armstrong Hominick.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the Minister. Minister, I want to commend you on the great job you and your department do. And tonight, there's been lots of good information, lots of back and forth, and at this late hour, you must feel like you're a rabbit. Anyhow, on page 79 of the business plan includes a performance measure 1B, outcomes for training for work program clients. In 2019, 75.1% of clients reported they are either employed or in further education or training after leaving a skills training program. Minister, can you please provide some examples of skills programs offered to Albertans through the Training for Work program, and what specific jobs or occupation is your ministry targeting?
Sir?
Well, thanks so much for the question. Training for Work, this is a tremendous program. And really the design of this program is we put out requests for proposals. We have organizations apply that wish to, that see a need in the labor market, provide training to individuals to fill that need. And quite frankly, they don't get paid unless 70% of their graduates either go to another course or actually find a job. So we find this has been very effective in terms of addressing labor market need. Although it takes some, in fairness, it takes some time to run the RFP process, and it takes time to set up and find service providers who can fill the need. In terms of who can or what the Training for Work program applies to, it is a range of occupations. So, for example, in the tech industry training in Calgary and Edmonton, focused on roles in cybersecurity, web, software development, cloud technology, and business analysis. Training for Work programs we've had run in supply chain training, which occurred in Red Deer, Lethbridge, Fort McMurray, Grand Prairie, and Edmonton. And there's also we also provide generally targeted wraparound support such as resume building, career planning, and training targeted to unemployed engineers and oil and gas workers in Calgary, so they can then pursue new careers in new industries. And we also do that as part of our overall program offering. And as our labor market needs changes, so too do the applications we have when we do a request for proposals for Training for Work. And this provides us some flexibility in terms of as the needs change, so too do our programs, and there's flexibility within the program funding.
Yes.
On page 79, key objective 1.5 outlines the ministry's focus to support economic growth, job creation, and diversification by launching the new AINP streams to attract job-creating entrepreneurs and specialized skills and talent to support Alberta's economy. Minister, could you please provide with more information on the specialized skills and talent you're hoping to attract?
Minister?
Well, one of the big ones is entrepreneurs. 3 of our streams are entrepreneur-based. We are looking for 2 of the streams, and we talked about them earlier, and we've launched already, is entrepreneur streams for our foreign students who come to Alberta, to our tremendous post-secondary education institutions, and graduate and now want to set up a business here. So that's one of the streams. Another stream is foreign students who graduate from colleges and universities outside of Canada, and we're targeting particularly in the U.S., who want to come to Canada and come to Alberta and create a business and be entrepreneurs, not only create jobs for themselves, but create jobs for other Albertans. And these two are launched. And the third stream, which I mentioned earlier, is a rural entrepreneur stream, which we haven't launched yet, but we will be doing in the not too distant future. And that is entrepreneurs or newcomers who want to come to rural Alberta and either buy a business that's already existing or invest and start up a new business. And I had the pleasure of touring this fall a number of constituencies outside of Calgary and Edmonton, meeting with newcomers who set up businesses, and almost every single one of them, not only they created a business for themselves and their families, but they created a business for other Albertans. And truly, these entrepreneurs will form a core component of our Alberta Recovery Plan. And the fourth one that I mentioned, the fourth stream, is in regards to the rural renewal stream, and that's really where there's a shortage of a particular occupation or occupations that, and we're looking to collaborate, quite frankly, with economic development authorities and rural municipalities and regions where there's a shortage and identified by them in the area, that we bring in those particular sectors and provide them an ability to be able to be involved in the process of selecting who we bring in through in essence, our ANIP, this new stream, and then we can target. And then in addition to that, what we also will be looking at in the future, recognizing that, as we come out of COVID and we have economic recovery, then we can use the Alberta Express Entry Stream more, identify those occupations where there are shortages, and then invite them to come to our province. And then they'll be able to fill the gaps. Because even at the end of the day, we take a look at, for example, in the tech industry, we have a lot of programs like Training for Work, which are training or retraining Albertans already here to work in the tech industry. But one thing we've heard from the tech industry as well is that what they need is senior level tech workers who can actually guide and train and mentor Albertans who are already here, but we don't have enough of those to be able to grow faster. So an opportunity that as our economy starts to rebound, to bring those individuals and those types of sectors into Alberta. But really that's because that, there's some of those types of key positions that are actually holding back Alberta companies from growing and growing faster and able to employ more Albertans. So that's another key sector that we're looking at, and we'll be able to pull that lever hopefully later this year as we get economic recovery.
Ms. Armstrong-Hominick.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, could you please advise how much money the ministry has allocated to the Training for Work program?
Minister.
So we have allocated $25.9 million to the Training for Work program, which, as I indicated before, serves unemployed or marginally employed Albertans, including those receiving employment insurance and provincial income support and are deemed able to work, delivered through third-party services. And the training is offered across the provinces and is aligned with regional labor market demand because it's done on an RFP basis. And there are, in terms of a little more background, there's 5 different categories under the Training for Work program. We have immigrant bridging, integrated training, self-employment, transition to employment services, and workplace training. And this is in the Training for Work has included the skills and training support line in Labor and Immigration's 21-22 estimates.
Ms. Armstrong-Hominick.
Thank you, Minister. Chair, if it's all right with you, I'd like to cede my time to my colleague, Ms.
Rosen.
Sorry, my glasses came off when I took my mask off. Chair, how much time do I have left?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, well, Minister, I'll be fairly quick then. Something that we talked a lot about in the campaign and that we heard resoundingly from small businesses, primarily restaurant owners and coffee shops, was the need to reform and look at the occupational health and safety codes in Alberta. We heard resoundingly that there was an abundance of red tape and that was causing significant difficulty to these small business owners who wanted to keep their employees safe and operate in a safe environment, but were really struggling to abide by all of the regulations. So on page 79, key objective 2.1 of your business plan, it advises that your ministry will review the occupational health and safety codes to improve health and safety outcomes while enabling innovation, competitiveness, and streamlining regulatory requirements. So I'm wondering if you can just please provide more information regarding this review, what's being contained in it, and a timeline of when you expect that review to be complete. Thank you.
Minister.
Thanks so much for the question. So we have put out a plan to review all elements of the code over a 3-year period. We will do on the first tranche, we will do a consultation starting in 2 weeks. And our focus has been to how do we reduce the red tape? How do we ensure, well, first off, how do we ensure safety and make it easily understandable? Then how do we reduce the red tape? How do we standardize, which actually improves safety and reduces red tape at the same time when you do it across different jurisdictions? And how do we actually also allow, where possible, flexibility so that the safety outcomes will be achieved, but you can do it in different ways that both employers and employees working together can identify and do that. So we're starting consultation on the first tranche of a number of the sections of the code in the coming weeks, and we hope to have that implement once we get the feedback on that, and then make those changes over the coming months, and then we'll start with the
Thank you, Minister. Sorry to interrupt. From red tape to white rabbits to Ms. Gray. Oh, Mr. Nielsen.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Thanks, Chair. Appreciate it. So, Minister, I just want to pop back over to the critical worker benefit, which, quite frankly, it has been widely criticized as onerous. I know right after it launched, I'm holding the PowerPoint of 19 pages of how to be able to navigate through it. And we have heard some feedback around it not being equitable for employees within the same employer. So we'll see in the retail sector where you'll have an employer that's saying, well, I have employees that are qualifying for the program over here as a cashier, but yet over in this store, in this other jurisdiction, we have an employee who's a cashier who's not qualifying for that. And so I guess when I look at that and noting the fact that it was 9 months or so before it was developed as well. So I guess for a program that seems, well, quite frankly, a little bit red tape heavy, I'm just wondering how much money was spent in developing this program, which, as we also know, ended up with a data breach as well.
Minister?
So we'll have to do the exact number in terms of the, because there was some money that was invested in terms of leveraging Service Alberta and just sort of writing the new code and putting out the project. I don't have that exact number with me at this point in time. What I can tell you though is that we worked hard to try to minimize the administrative costs associated with the program. We chose a program design which, quite frankly, was more complicated, whereby for those who are eligible to receive it, particularly through the quasi-public, not-for-profit organizations that do fantastic work in our health system, community social services, education system, children's services, that we would deliver through departments, so we wouldn't have to set up a separate infrastructure. Now, for the delivery to the private sector, we did have separate infrastructure, so there was cost, and I'll get back to you associated with that. But again, I want to come back to the whole notion of concerns with equity. There was guidelines that were put out by the federal government in terms of the that generally speaking, we target lower wage workers. So I appreciate that within some organizations, higher wage workers aren't eligible and lower wage workers aren't. I can tell you that, when we took a look at other jurisdictions that were doing this, had very different definitions of what lower wage. Ours, we set the bar at $25 an hour for the private sector, which is quite a bit higher than you'll find in other jurisdictions. And we had to make choices in regards to who was involved. We thank all the workers because, as you know, well over 80% of workers continue to work. They were essential, deemed working in essential, providing essential services during the pandemic. So we fully appreciate all the work that they did. There's limited money within the overall program envelope that was provided by the federal government, and the government of Alberta also kicked in $118 million to this, and so we could. So we thank all the workers who do the work, but we chose those who are in healthcare, those who are providing services to the most vulnerable, social services, education, and as well as grocery store clerks and others who are providing support to our food supply chains and our medical supply chains as well.
Mr. Nielsen?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I think the takeaway comment, though, of course, was, from the employers that have been making comments on this, they're saying that, their employee over in this jurisdiction, say, for instance, Edmonton, a cashier, and another one down in, say, Lethbridge, also cashier, both doing the same job, both making the same wage. The one in Edmonton qualified and the one in Lethbridge didn't. And so I'm just, hopefully you'll be able to take away from that. So one of the other questions that I did have around this development, again, as I mentioned, it seemed a little bit red tape heavy. Was there any consultation with the red tape reduction ministry in the development of this?
Minister?
So we did not consult specifically with the ministry on this, although we always have conversations with my cabinet colleagues. But when we actually move forward with programs of this type, I do actually we did pull down the number that we actually spent from an IT perspective, which is $252,000 to be able to do from a capital standpoint to set up for the program. And I can also let me provide one more comment in regards to employees. We have, we fully appreciate that if employee is supporting a grocery clerk supporting the food supply chain, they will be eligible. I understand that other who are not supporting the food supply chain or in food retail would not be eligible. So that may be a reason for the difference, but we'll, if you got something specific and you think that's being applied incorrectly, please feel free to raise it with my office.
Thanks, Minister. So I guess around the critical worker benefit, there's some understanding that there's some contractors working within that program. I'm just wondering how many contractors there are specifically working on that.
Minister?
We have full-time staff and contractors working on that. I wanted to confirm the numbers because there was some discussion here whether they're exact. So I don't want to give the wrong number, but we can actually provide that to you and Member Gray in the near future.
Perfect. And how much time do I have left, Mr. Chair?
You have 3 minutes, 40 seconds.
I can probably get this last question in here. And so I guess when we're looking, as was brought up earlier, around our youth unemployment, I guess more specifically, what's being done to try to alleviate that? What other kinds of red tape reductions are you looking at in order to achieve reducing youth unemployment?
Minister?
Well, I think generally, and when we talk about red tape reduction, is as we reduce the cost to employers of hiring employees, you will generate job opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise have. So a lot of the changes that we're working on the red tape reduction side, in terms of to reduce the overall cost, and changes that we've made last year in terms of a number of the acts that we passed in the legislature in dealing with employment standards, and even occupational health and safety. Which will actually, improve not only health and safety outcomes, but also reduce the burden on employers. That will help create more opportunities than otherwise would be placed. In terms of work that our department is doing in terms of supporting Albertans generally and getting back to work, again, as I indicated to Member Gray, the Alberta Jobs Now program will be a tremendous tool to be able to get Albertans back to work, including youth. And we are also, through our training for work programs and our LMP grant program, we have programs that are specifically targeted for youth, and I want to give you a couple of examples. So, for example, our LMP grant youth, it's a grant with Future Sight Incorporated. We have a project with Gen X Thrives, and it was a full-day Zoom event with keynote presenters, panel sessions, and breakfast to target particularly youth and next gen who are faced with how best to proceed, find a job, and connect with employers. We also did part of a grant for another group of youth, Indigenous youth, for Treaty 7 partners, and this is again looking at how do we connect youth with employers, promote opportunities for them to find work, and then facilitate employment success. So these are just a couple of examples that we're using. So we have some of our broader programs which youth can apply to, and then we also target within our very, either our labor market programming or our training for work programs that we can target specific groups and try to get them back to work.
Mr. Nelson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And so, Minister, I guess I can't help but asking here at this point, how much interaction does your ministry have with the red tape reduction ministry? And I guess the reason I'm asking why is, comments upon comments upon comments about the amount of money that we're spending on the ministry for red tape reduction, but it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of interaction there. So perhaps you could, tell us, is there interaction there, or are we really just spending $10.3 million where something could actually, and already is happening just within the ministry itself?
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. We will now enter our final set with Government Caucus. Mr. Walker, I believe that you are up.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister Copping, for being here today for estimates. It's been a great discussion back and forth with the opposition and government members, and I want to also say hello to your staff who are with us today. As you know, I formerly worked in labor before I flipped over to become an MLA, and I greatly enjoyed my time there. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also directly say hello to one of my former bosses, Miles Morris. It's great that he's there with you, providing great support. And Miles is also a constituent, so that's amazing. So in the time remaining here, Minister, through the chair, what I'm going to try to do is, quite simply, with the time constraints, pull a rabbit, a gopher, or a platypus, if you will, out of the hat to ask these critical questions. And I want to say first, Minister, how happy I am and pleased I am as a former immigration official at IQOS and AIMP, the great work you have done with the Fairness for Newcomers Action Plan. We're very excited about that, as well as the Fair Registrations Practices Act, which of course supports that great work. I have dealt with so many constituents, newcomers, who have found they've seen tremendous barriers reduced for their credential recognition processes and working more effectively with PROs through the Fairness for Newcomers office. Thank you so much for all that amazing work. And when we're talking about reducing red tape, as Mr. Nielsen had brought up, Chair, I would again turn him to the great work, and the minister talked about it earlier, the incredible work on the immigration file that the minister has done. But my comments and questions today, Minister, will be focused on the Alberta Jobs Now program. There is a lot of excitement around that. And so, Minister, I would like to turn you to page 79 of the business plan under Outcome 1, Key Objective 1.1. It mentions that the Alberta Jobs Now program that will reduce the hiring cost for job creators. I see your ministry as a critical part of the Alberta Recovery Plan. It is a hopeful, optimistic message to build record infrastructure, diversify our economy, and create good-paying jobs for Albertans. And I know how important the immigration strategy, too, as well as the labor, is linked in to the ARP. So, on the Alberta Jobs Now plan, Minister, can you please provide details as to how the Alberta Jobs Now program will operate? Thank you, Chair.
Minister?
Well, thank you so much for the question. I'm really excited about the program, and I'm excited to announce it. We're still, as indicated, we're waiting for the final sign-off from the federal government, and I look forward to announcing it in the next few weeks. I can say, as I hinted already earlier, that the program, will be more like the Canada Alberta Jobs Grant in terms of providing support to employers to train employees do that, but it's not going to be it's so much like that it's going to be not used. I think this will be very well used, and I look forward to be able to announce and be able to provide you and all Albertans all the details about how this program is going to work in the coming weeks.
Mr. Walker?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Very excited to see that rollout coming, Minister. We're all super excited. And so speaking of the rollout, Minister, through the Chair, how will you guys ensure a successful rollout of the program? Will it be more soft launch, or is it going to be a larger, more focused media blitz, Minister?
Minister?
So once we get there, it will be it will not be a soft launch. There will be an announcement. We are working already to set up a online application portal to try to deliver this as efficiently and as effectively as possible with detailed guidelines and checklists for employers to apply, and so that prospective employees actually know about the program as well. We'll set up a program phone line and a website, and do various online marketing promotions so that not only unemployed Albertans will understand and know about the program, but employers will know about it and then be able to take advantage of it. Because we think this has tremendous potential to get Albertans back to work and reduce the cost to employers for hiring them, and at the same time provide Albertans with the skills they need to get back into the workforce and then continue working into the future. We're optimistic about this program. We're optimistic about the plans that our government has for the Alberta Economic Recovery Plan in not only improving the increasing jobs in the energy sector, but also diversification, our plans for diversification in other sectors, including the great announcement that we had on the tech sector earlier this week.
Mr. Walker?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for your response. We know Alberta is an entrepreneurial province. It is the entrepreneurial heartland of Canada. Henry and Martha know that the dignity of work is something to be highly valued, and we know how much Albertans who are unfortunately unemployed right now really want to get back to work, and we're confident. I'm confident that the Alberta Jobs Now program will assist that. So thank you for those thoughtful responses. I want to now, if I have a little time, get into the numbers of the Alberta Jobs Now program. So under initiative supporting key objective on page 79 of the business plan, it mentions that $127.5 million is allocated to the Alberta Jobs Now program. Minister, can you describe the measures that were considered while determining the budget for this program?
Minister?
So the in designing this program, and the total program is just under $200 million, as I indicated in my opening remarks. And that $200 million is spread over a number of years. And when we're looking at and we're leveraging 185 million federal dollars associated with this program, and we're taking a look at this. In terms of launching it, we wanted to time it with the opening of the economic, like first of all coming out of the second wave, and then our economic recovery moving up, so that employers can take advantage of this and create, not only reduce the cost to employ Albertans, but create long-lasting jobs that Albertans can get hired into and then stay working at. And so all this went into our calculation in terms of how we're going to allocate the funds over the various different.
I apologize for the interruption, Minister, but I must advise the committee that the time allotted for consideration of the ministry's estimates has concluded. I would like to remind committee members that we are scheduled to meet next on March 15th, 2021 at 7:00 p.m. to consider the estimates of the Ministry of Culture, Multiculturalism, and the Status of Women. Thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned. Have a good rabbit.